The sound of metal striking concrete echoed across the North Carolina morning like a gunshot, causing 30 recruits to freeze in perfect formation. Master Sergeant Robert Blackwood had slammed the M4 carbine onto the ground with such force that the magazine ejected, skittering across the pavement. His weathered face, lined with 63 years of hard living and harder combat, flushed crimson beneath his drill instructor's hat. "Reynolds," his voice boomed across the assembly area, carrying the authority of 4 decades in uniform. "Who the hell taught you to field strip an M4 like that? My goddamn grandmother could reassemble that weapon faster, and she's been dead since Reagan was president." The July heat pressed down on Fort Bragg like a physical weight, 95 degrees with humidity thick enough to swim through. Dark patches of sweat spread across uniforms, the morning sun already merciless at 0700 hours. The Special Forces training facility sprawled around them, 400 square miles of military might, where America's elite warriors had trained for generations. The main parade ground where they stood had witnessed the birth of countless Green Berets, Delta operators, and Rangers before them. Alexandra Reynolds stood motionless in the formation of recruits, her small 5'2" frame nearly lost among the taller soldiers surrounding her. At 22, she was neither the youngest nor the oldest in the group, but something about her stillness drew attention, not the nervous rigidity of most recruits, but the composed calm of someone conserving energy. "I'm waiting for an answer, Reynolds." Blackwood's voice cut through her thoughts. "No excuse, Sergeant," she replied, her voice soft but clear, carrying just far enough to reach the front row. Blackwood moved toward her with the deliberate stride of a predator, his combat boots striking the pavement with measured precision. The desert tan of his uniform was pressed to regulation perfection, his Ranger tab and combat patches telling a story of service, stretching back to Operation Desert Storm. A collection of faded scars across his forearms spoke of battles that had never made the evening news. "No excuse," he repeated, towering over her. "That's the first sensible thing you have said since arriving at my facility, Reynolds." The morning light caught the medical compression wrap on Alex's right wrist as she maintained her position at attention. The tactical-grade orthopedic support was worn at the edges, a small portion of what appeared to be a logo barely visible beneath the sleeve of her uniform. With a practiced motion, she subtly adjusted her stance, ensuring the sleeve covered whatever lay beneath. Blackwood's eyes narrowed, catching the movement. "Something wrong with your arm, recruit? Perhaps you'd prefer knitting class to rifle qualification." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the formation before dying under Blackwood's glare. "No, Sergeant. The wrist is fully functional," Alex replied, her eyes fixed forward. Blackwood studied her for a moment longer, his gaze analytical rather than merely intimidating. This close, the lines around his eyes told of squinting through sandstorms in Iraq and the harsh glare of desert sun. His nose had been broken at least twice, and his hands bore the calluses of a man who had fired more rounds than most soldiers would in 3 lifetimes. "Today," he announced, turning to address the entire formation, "is your preliminary marksmanship qualification. Pass, and you continue training. Fail." He let the word hang in the humid air. "Well, let's just say the civilian world is always hiring security guards at the local mall." He gestured toward the armory building behind him, a low concrete structure that housed enough firepower to start a small war. "You'll each be assigned a weapon. Treat it like your firstborn child. Love it, clean it, learn its temperament. Because in the field, that weapon will be the difference between coming home, standing up, or lying down." The recruit shifted uneasily, the gravity of his words settling on shoulders already weighed down by weeks of grueling training. Fort Bragg's Special Forces selection process was designed to break candidates to identify those with the physical and mental resilience necessary for the most demanding missions. The washout rate typically hovered around 70%. "Reynolds," Blackwood called out again, "since you're so eager to demonstrate your expertise, why don't you tell everyone the effective range of the M24 sniper weapon system?" It was a trap question when not covered in their basic training materials, designed to expose her lack of knowledge. Several recruits glanced her way, anticipating the embarrassment. Alex hesitated a fraction of a second too long for someone who didn't know the answer. "The M24 has an effective range of 800 meters, Sergeant," she replied, "though experienced marksmen can engage targets beyond 1,000 meters under ideal conditions." Blackwood's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. Her answer was textbook perfect, too perfect for a basic recruit. "And the barrel twist rate," he pressed. One turn and 11.25 inches for the original M24 optimized for the 175-grain M118LR ammunition. Alex answered the words flowing naturally before she could catch herself. Though the reconfigured M24A2 uses a different twist rate to accommodate heavier bullets. A silence fell over the formation. No recruit should know such specialized information details typically reserved for advanced sniper training. Blackwood's weathered face revealed nothing but his eyes had taken on the focused intensity of a predator that had just detected something unusual in its territory. "Interesting," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, "All right, maggots, move out to the range in formation." Reynolds a word. As the others marched toward the firing range, Alex remained standing at attention. Blackwood circled her slowly, boots crunching on the gravel. "Where did you learn about barrel twist rates, Reynolds?" His voice had lost its theatrical drill instructor quality, replaced by something more dangerous, genuine curiosity. "My father was a gunsmith, Sergeant," she replied, the answer prepared long in advance. "I grew up around firearms." Blackwood stopped directly in front of her. "Your file says your father was an insurance salesman in Columbus, Ohio." Alex's pulse quickened, but her face remained impassive. "He sold insurance by day. Gunsmithing was his passion." From the administration building across the parade ground, a figure had emerged and was walking toward them with unhurried confidence. Colonel James Harrison, base commander and Vietnam veteran, was not a man who typically involved himself with recruit training. At 65, Harrison carried himself with the straight-back discipline of a career soldier, his silver hair cropped in the same military cut he'd worn since 1968. The rows of ribbons on his chest told a story of American military engagement spanning half a century from the jungles of Vietnam to the mountains of Afghanistan. His face was a map of experiences with deep lines around eyes that had seen more death than most could imagine. "Master Sergeant," Harrison called out as he approached, "I trust our recruits are being properly motivated this morning." Blackwood snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. Just clarifying some points with Private Reynolds before qualification." Harrison's gaze shifted to Alex, studying her with the experienced eye of a commander who had evaluated thousands of soldiers over his career. "Carry on, then. I'll be observing today's qualification personally." As Harrison continued toward the range, Blackwood leaned closer to Alex. "I've got my eye on you, Reynolds. Something doesn't add up, and I've been in this game too long and not to trust my instincts." He straightened. "Now move out. You've got a qualification to fail." As Alex jogged to catch up with her unit, Blackwood watched her go, noting the precision in her movements, the balanced gait of someone with exceptional body awareness. His weathered hand unconsciously moved to touch the faded scar that ran from his elbow to his wrist, a souvenir from Operation Desert Storm, and a permanent reminder that underestimating an opponent often came with a bloody price tag. The Olympic shooting range in Beijing shimmered in the August heat, the precision-engineered firing stations arranged in perfect symmetry. 20-year-old Sarah Mitchell stood in position, her custom Anschutz 1913 competition rifle an extension of her body. The specialized shooting jacket stuffed with reinforcement panels stabilized her frame as she sighted down the 50-meter range. The finals of the women's three-position rifle event had drawn down to the last shot. Sarah's breathing slowed to a measured rhythm, 3 seconds, in 3 seconds, hold gentle exhale. Her heart rate, naturally low at 52 beats per minute, slowed further under her control. The aperture sight aligned perfectly with the 10.9mm center ring of the target. Her finger applied precisely 1.5 pounds of pressure to the match-grade trigger just shy of the 2.1-pound breakpoint. A fraction more pressure applied with surgical precision. Alexandra Reynolds bolted upright in her bunk, sweat soaking through her standard-issue t-shirt despite the air conditioning in the Fort Bragg barracks. The digital clock read 0247. Another night, another memory masquerading as a dream. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push away the images that followed that perfect Olympic moment. The medal ceremony, the national anthem, the crushing weight of expectations that had followed. The barracks around her were quiet except for the occasional snore or rustle of sheets. 30 women each pursuing their own military destiny, unaware they slept mere feet from a 3-time Olympic gold medalist. Alex slipped from her bunk, careful not to wake her bunkmate, and made her way to the bathroom. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she unwrapped the compression sleeve from her wrist, revealing the small Olympic rings tattoo she normally kept hidden. Beneath it ran a thin scar, a permanent reminder of the surgery that had repaired the tendon damage from years of competitive shooting. Can't sleep either, a voice came from behind her. Alex quickly rewrapped her wrist before turning to face Lieutenant Michael Davis. At 28, Davis carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already seen combat. His collection of medals from 3 Afghanistan tours was matched only by the collection of scars visible along his forearms. Just restless, Alex replied, careful to maintain the persona she had constructed. Alexandra Reynolds, unremarkable recruit from Ohio, not Sarah Mitchell, the most decorated American marksman of her generation. Davis leaned against the doorframe. Pre-qualification jitters. Don't sweat it. Blackwood's bark is worse than his bite. I'm not worried about the qualification, Alex said perhaps too quickly. Davis studied her with interest. Unlike many of the other officers, he never attempted to intimidate the recruits. His leadership style was built on earned respect rather than enforced fear. You know, Reynolds, I've been watching you during training, he said casually. You're different from the others. You maintain the perfect middle ground, never standing out at the top or bottom of any exercise. It's almost like you're deliberately flying under the radar. Alex felt her pulse quicken. Just trying to get through training like everyone else, sir. Davis nodded, unconvinced. Well, word of advice, Blackwood doesn't miss much. Whatever you're hiding, he's already sniffing around it. I'm not hiding anything, sir. Davis smiled slightly. Everyone here is hiding something, Reynolds. That's why most of us joined up in the first place. He pushed off from the doorframe. Get some rest. Tomorrow's qualification is no joke. As he left, Alex exhaled slowly, the techniques for controlling her breathing during competition, shooting now used to manage her anxiety. Davis was right about one thing: Blackwood was already suspicious. She needed to be more careful. Back in her bunk, Alex closed her eyes but couldn't escape the memory that waited behind her eyelids. Not Beijing this time, but Geneva 2 years later. The International Shooting Sport Federation World Championship. The event that had ended Sarah Mitchell's public career and sent her into hiding. The finalist range was silent except for the mechanical sounds of high-precision firearms being adjusted. Sarah lay in prone position, her Accuracy International AX-50 sniper rifle perfectly aligned with the 1,000-meter target. This exhibition match paired Olympic shooters with military marksmen, a showcase of civilian and military precision, shooting at its finest. Her spotter, Captain Thomas Reed, monitored conditions through his high-powered scope. Wind holding steady at 3 miles per hour left to right, he murmured. Temperature 62 degrees, humidity 45%. Perfect conditions. This was the final shot of the team competition. The U.S. team led by a mere half point. Sarah's shot would either secure victory or surrender it to the Russian team waiting their turn. Through her scope, the target seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. She made minute adjustments for wind drift and the barely perceptible Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation. Her breathing slowed, her pulse steadied, her finger caressed the trigger. For 22 years, Sarah Mitchell had never missed when it mattered. From her first junior competition at age 8 to Olympic gold at 20, she had built a reputation for supernatural consistency under pressure. The girl who never misses, the commentators called her. The shot broke clean, the rifle's recoil absorbed perfectly by her positioning. But something was wrong. She knew at the instant the firing pin struck the primer. Miss Wright, 2 minutes of angle, Reed announced, disbelief evident in his voice. How is that possible? Sarah stared through her scope in shock. The bullet had missed the center by nearly 20 inches, an impossible error for a shooter of her caliber. In that moment, something broke inside her. The foundation of her identity, perfect accuracy under pressure, had crumbled. What the public never learned was what happened next. As the Russian team celebrated their unexpected victory, Reed had examined her rifle, finding clear evidence of tampering. The scope mount had been minutely shifted, the barrel subtly altered. Someone had sabotaged her weapon. But before an investigation could be launched, Captain Reed was killed in a suspicious car accident on the way back to their hotel. The official report called it a tragic coincidence. Sarah knew better. 3 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell disappeared from public view. Olympic officials, shooting federations, and eventually her family reported her missing. 6 months after that, Alexandra Reynolds enlisted in the United States Army. Alex opened her eyes in the darkened barracks, the memory fading, but the pain still fresh. Tomorrow's qualification wasn't just another hurdle in her training. It was the first step toward finding out who had sabotaged her rifle, who had killed Reed, and why. The answers she believed lay somewhere within the military connected to a classified program she'd only heard whispered about. A program that recruited civilian specialists with extraordinary skills for missions that officially didn't exist. In the morning light, as she prepared her uniform with practiced precision, Lieutenant Davis approached again. "Ready for the big show, Reynolds?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "As ready as anyone, sir," she replied, securing her boots with precise movements. Davis lowered his voice. "Blackwood's in a mood today. Word is he's planning something special for the qualification. Just be prepared." Before Alex could respond, the morning horn sounded, calling all recruits to formation. As she filed out with the others, she couldn't shake the feeling that today would change everything, that the carefully constructed identity she had built was about to face its greatest test. What she couldn't know was that 3 different sets of eyes would be watching her performance with intense interest, each with their own agenda and expectations. And that before the day ended, the first domino would fall in a sequence that would eventually expose a conspiracy reaching back to the coldest days of the Cold War. Colonel James Harrison closed the door to his office, the solid oak panel shutting with a definitive click that signaled privacy and secrecy. The office itself was a testament to 4 decades of military service. Shadow boxes containing medals from Vietnam photographs with 3 different presidents and various unit insignia from commands he had held around the world. Across from him sat Lieutenant Colonel William Carter, 58, his Defense Intelligence Agency credentials displayed on the table between them. Carter's immaculate uniform contrasted with his weathered face, the look of a man who spent more time in the field than behind a desk despite his rank. "I appreciate you making time, James." Carter began, his voice carrying the slight gravel of a longtime smoker who had recently quit, especially on qualification day. Harrison settled into his leather chair, a relic from his first command post that had followed him throughout his career. "When the DIA requests a meeting about a classified program I haven't heard of in 30 years, I make time, Bill." He leaned forward. Project Sentinel was supposed to have been shut down after the wall fell. "What's going on?" Carter removed a file folder from his briefcase, the cover stamped with Cosmic Top Secret in faded red ink, a classification level so restricted that only a handful of people in the entire military were cleared to know of its existence. "Sentinel never actually ended," Carter said, sliding the folder across the desk. "It was restructured, renamed a few times, but the core mission remained active under deep cover." Harrison opened the folder, his eyes widening slightly as he scanned the contents. "You're recruiting again? After what happened in '89? The world's changing, James. Near-peer adversaries are catching up technologically. We need unconventional assets more than ever." Harrison flipped through several pages, stopping at a photograph of a young woman receiving an Olympic gold medal. "Sarah Mitchell," he read, 3-time Olympic gold medalist, 4 world records. He looked up sharply. "Reported missing 8 months ago." Carter nodded. "Not missing, recruited. Or more accurately, she came to us after an incident at the World Championship in Geneva." He tapped another page in the file. "Her spotter was killed under suspicious circumstances after they discovered her rifle had been tampered with." "And you think she's here at my base?" Harrison's voice carried disbelief. "We know she is," Carter confirmed. "She enlisted under the name Alexandra Reynolds. Our facial recognition picked her up during routine security monitoring. We've been tracking her progress through basic training." Harrison sat back, processing this information. "Why didn't you inform me immediately? This is my command, Bill." "Compartmentalization. Standard protocol for Sentinel recruits. We observe first approach when ready." Carter's expression softened slightly. "But there's a complication. Mitchell, or Reynolds as she's calling herself, wasn't officially recruited. She found her way to us independently. We're not entirely sure what she knows or why she's here." Harrison closed the file. "And you want me to what? Pull her from training, expedite her to your program?" "Quite the opposite," Carter said. "We want you to test her. Really test her. Find out what she's made of beyond the Olympic medals and records. Is she Sentinel material? Or is she pursuing a personal agenda that might compromise operational security?" Outside the office window, recruits could be seen marching toward the firing range in perfect formation. The morning sun glinted off the metal equipment they carried, creating brief flashes of light across the parade ground. "There's something else you're not telling me," Harrison said, his eyes never leaving Carter's face. "This isn't just about one recruit, no matter how decorated." Carter hesitated, then nodded. "There's been a pattern. 3 former Olympic athletes in different sports have died under suspicious circumstances in the past 18 months. All had connections to military training programs, though none were officially part of Sentinel. And you think Mitchell is either a target or somehow involved. That's what we need to determine." Carter retrieved another document from his briefcase, this one sealed in a special security envelope. "We're activating the contingency protocol, full evaluation, including psychological stress testing." Harrison's expression darkened. "That protocol hasn't been used since Vietnam. It's extreme, Bill, even borderline unethical by today's standards." "These are extreme times," Carter replied, "and Mitchell isn't just any recruit. She may be the most naturally gifted marksman of her generation. If she's compromised or pursuing her own vendetta, we need to know before we put any operational resources behind her." Harrison sighed, the weight of 40 years of service evident in the sound. "Who else is aware of her presence here?" "Just us and one other asset we've positioned to evaluate her." Carter checked his watch. "Master Sergeant Frank Sullivan arrived on base yesterday. Former MACV SOG, served 3 tours in Vietnam as a sniper. He's been working with our Olympic shooting team as a technical advisor for the past 15 years. Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Sullivan, the ghost of the A Shell Valley. I thought he retired years ago." "Officially, he did. Unofficially, he's been one of our most valuable talent scouts for Sentinel. He personally identified Mitchell as a potential asset when she was just 16. Carter stood gathering his materials. "He'll be observing today's qualification. If she performs as expected, he'll make the approach." As Carter prepared to leave, Harrison asked one final question. "Does Blackwood know about any of this?" Carter paused at the door. "Blackwood has his role to play, but no, he's not briefed on Sentinel, though he might recognize the signs. He was evaluated for the program himself back in the 80s. Blackwood was a Sentinel candidate." Harrison couldn't hide his surprise. "Evaluated and rejected," Carter confirmed. "His marksmanship scores were exceptional, but psychological profiling indicated potential instability under certain conditions." He offered a thin smile. "Perhaps that's why he became such an effective drill instructor instead." After Carter departed, Harrison remained at his desk, staring at the closed folder. Project Sentinel had begun during the darkest days of the Cold War, a program designed to identify and recruit civilians with extraordinary skills, particularly in marksmanship, for missions that could never be officially acknowledged. Its legacy was mixed. Some of America's most effective covert operations had been carried out by Sentinel operatives. But there had also been failures, catastrophic ones, that had been buried so deep that even most senior military personnel had never heard of them. Harrison buzzed his assistant. "Get me Master Sergeant Blackwood immediately." 15 minutes later, Blackwood stood at attention in Harrison's office, his drill instructor bearing never wavering despite the unusual summons. "Sir, Master Sergeant Blackwood reporting as ordered." "At ease, Sergeant," Harrison said, studying the man before him. Blackwood had served under his command for nearly a decade, his reputation for producing exceptional soldiers matched only by his reputation for ruthlessness in training. "I want to discuss today's qualification exercise." "Yes, sir. All preparations are complete. The recruits are proceeding to the range now." Harrison leaned forward. "I have a special interest in one of your recruits, Private Reynolds." If Blackwood was surprised, he didn't show it. "Reynolds, sir, small female recruit, keeps to herself, maintains middle-of-the-pack performance in most evaluations." "That's the one. I want you to challenge her today. Really push her." Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "May I ask why, sir?" Harrison carefully considered his next words. "Let's just say there's reason to believe she's not performing at her true capability level. I want to see what happens when she's forced out of her comfort zone." A slow smile spread across Blackwood's weathered face. "I have just the thing, sir. The old M24 in the armory, the one with the cracked stock and misaligned scope. It's practically a museum piece, barely functional." "Perfect," Harrison nodded. "Issue that to Reynolds. Let's see how she handles adversity." As Blackwood departed, Harrison turned to the window, watching the activity on the base with new awareness. Somewhere out there, a former Olympic champion was hiding in plain sight, pursuing her own agenda under an assumed identity. Whether she was a potential asset or a security threat remained to be seen. What he couldn't know was that Master Sergeant Frank Sullivan, the legendary sniper known as the Ghost, was already in position at the firing range, his experienced eyes waiting to evaluate not just Sarah Mitchell's marksmanship, but something far more important, her true motivation. Sullivan had settled into an observation post 100 meters back from the firing line, his weathered frame comfortable in the prone position despite his 65 years. The ghillie suit he wore, an old habit he never abandoned, made him nearly invisible among the tall grass and scrub brush that bordered the range. Through his high-powered spotting scope, Sullivan watched the recruits assembling for qualification. His attention focused immediately on the small figure of Alexandra Reynolds, noting her positioning, her bearing, the way she scanned her surroundings with subtle movements that most wouldn't notice. "There you are, golden girl," he murmured to himself, the familiar Tennessee drawl of his youth emerging when he was alone. "Let's see if you're still as good as you were in Beijing." Sullivan had first spotted Sarah Mitchell at a junior competition 15 years earlier, recognizing in the 7-year-old girl the same natural talent he had seen in the finest snipers he'd trained. He had quietly tracked her career, occasionally providing anonymous guidance through coaching contacts, steering her development without ever revealing his true interest. In the distance, Blackwood emerged from the armory building carrying what appeared to be an older rifle. Even from this distance, Sullivan could see the poor condition of the weapon, the duct tape wrapped around the stock, the worn finish on the barrel. "Well now," he whispered, adjusting his scope for a better view. "That's going to be interesting." At the firing line, Blackwood approached Alex, the battered M24 sniper rifle held with obvious disdain. "Reynolds," his voice carried across the range. "Special rifle for our special little recruit." Several other recruits snickered as Alex accepted the weapon without complaint. But Sullivan, watching through his scope, caught what others missed, the almost imperceptible assessment in her eyes as her hands wrapped around the rifle, the subtle way her fingers tested the trigger pull, checked the bolt action, evaluated the scope mount. "That's it, girl," Sullivan smiled to himself. "Show me what you got." From his position, Sullivan could see what Blackwood and the other instructors couldn't: the instant recognition in Alex's hands as they connected with the rifle. Not the tentative handling of a novice, but the intimate familiarity of someone reuniting with an old friend, regardless of its condition. The qualification was about to begin, and Sullivan settled in more comfortably, his weathered face set in concentration. 3 lives had already been lost. If his suspicions were correct, Sarah Mitchell might be walking into the same trap that had claimed them. But first she had to prove herself worthy of the truth. The battered rifle in her hands would either expose her or become the key to unlocking the conspiracy that had brought her here. As the morning sun climbed higher over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the firing range, 3 separate agendas converged on a single point: a young woman with a damaged rifle and a damaged past, about to reveal a skill set that couldn't be taught and couldn't be hidden. The first shots of qualification day would echo beyond the range, setting in motion events that had been decades in the making, reaching back to the shadowy operations of the Cold War and forward to a new kind of threat that few understood. For Alexandra Reynolds, born Sarah Mitchell, the true test was about to begin. The July sun hung over Fort Bragg's firing range like a merciless judge, the temperature already pushing 95 degrees by 0900 hours. The humidity wrapped around every recruit like a sodden blanket, turning uniforms dark with sweat and making each breath feel like drowning on dry land. Heat waves distorted the distant targets, making them dance and shimmer against the backstop berms. Master Sergeant Blackwood stood before the assembled recruits, his face expressionless as sweat carved paths through the dust on his weathered features. Unlike the young soldiers suffering in the heat, Blackwood seemed almost at home in the punishing conditions, a product of 3 decades spent in the world's most unforgiving combat zones. "Listen up," he announced, his voice carrying across the range despite the heavy air. "Qualification consists of 10 rounds at variable distances. Minimum passing score, that is 70 points. Anything less, and you're done here." His eyes swept across the line of nervous recruits before settling on Alexandra Reynolds. "Some of you won't make it past today." Behind him, the armory sergeant distributed weapons, standard-issue M4 carbines for most recruits. Each rifle had been meticulously maintained, cleaned, and zeroed for optimal performance. The weapons gleamed in the harsh sunlight, the parkerized finish absorbing the glare. When the armory sergeant reached, Alex Blackwood stepped forward. "Not that one," he instructed, taking the M4 from the sergeant's hands and returning it to the rack. "Private Reynolds gets special treatment today." He reached to the back of the weapons cart and pulled out what appeared to be a relic from another era. The M24 sniper weapon system he handed to Alex was barely recognizable as a functional firearm. The synthetic stock had a prominent crack running from the grip to the forearm, held together with layers of duct tape and what appeared to be epoxy. The barrel, designed to maintain sub-MOA accuracy, was marred with rust spots that resembled a disease. The once precise Leupold M3A scope was visibly misaligned, the mounting rings loose, and the elevation turret damaged. "Something wrong, Reynolds?" Blackwood asked, noticing her hesitation. "Not what you expected." Alex accepted the weapon without comment, though her eyes quickly assessed the damage with the practiced evaluation of someone who understood exactly what she was holding and precisely how compromised it was. From his concealed position 100 meters back, Master Sergeant Sullivan adjusted his spotting scope, focusing on Alex's hands as they moved across the battered rifle. Even at this distance, with the heat distortion, he could see the subtle telltale signs of expertise, the way her fingers instinctively found the balance point, how she immediately checked the crown of the barrel, her evaluation of the bolt action's smoothness. "Look at that," Sullivan whispered to himself. Muscle memory doesn't lie. Through his high-powered optics, he watched as Alex's thumb traced the worn rifling at the muzzle end, her expression unchanging despite what must have been a disturbing discovery. The lands and grooves, designed to impart stabilizing spin to the bullet, had been worn down through thousands of rounds in inadequate maintenance. A less experienced shooter might not have even thought to check. Back at the firing line, Alex settled into the prone position with the damaged rifle. The shooting mats provided minimal cushioning against the hard-packed earth already hot to the touch despite the early hour. Lieutenant Davis, assigned as range safety officer, moved along the line checking positions and offering last-minute advice to nervous recruits. When he reached Alex, he paused. "Reynolds," he said, keeping his voice neutral but his eyes concerned. "That rifle looks problematic." "It's serviceable, sir," she replied quietly. Davis glanced at the weapon, clearly noticing the extensive damage. "That's being generous." He lowered his voice further. "Blackwood's setting you up to fail. You know that, right?" Alex's expression remained impassive. "I'll manage, sir." As Davis moved on, Alex began her pre-firing ritual, a sequence so ingrained it had become unconscious. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreasing through controlled respiration techniques developed over thousands of hours of competition shooting. Her body settled into the ground, creating maximum contact area for stability. With methodical precision, she began addressing the rifle's most critical flaws. First, she tightened the loose scope rings, using the multi-tool from her pocket, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Next, she evaluated the trigger, pull approximately 6 pounds far heavier than the competition-grade 2-pound triggers she was accustomed to, but manageable with proper technique. The stock's crack would affect harmonics, creating inconsistent vibration patterns that would throw off accuracy at distance. She repositioned her grip to counteract this, finding a point where pressure could stabilize the fractured components. Most concerning was the barrel condition. The rust and wear meant unpredictable bullet behavior with potential keyholing and velocity variations. The rifling wear would reduce spin stabilization, especially with the standard M118LR ammunition. They'd been issued 175-grain bullets that required optimal barrel conditions for accuracy beyond 600 meters. As Alex made these assessments and adjustments, Sullivan watched through his scope, a smile of appreciation crossing his weathered face. "That's it," he murmured. "Work the problem." What impressed him most wasn't just her technical knowledge, it was her methodical approach under pressure. Where other recruits fidgeted nervously with their weapons, Alex was systematically converting a piece of junk into something that might be capable of precision fire. Blackwood moved along the line, stopping behind Alex. "Something interesting about that antique Reynolds." "Just getting familiar with it, Sergeant," she replied without looking up. "Familiar, Blackwood scoffed. "That rifle was old when I was in Desert Storm. Probably shot more rounds than you've been alive days." He leaned closer. "Let's see how familiar you get with failure." As Blackwood moved away, Alex completed her final checks. The damage scope 0 was off by at least 3 minutes of angle, a massive deviation that would place shots nearly 18 inches from point of aim at 600 meters. Rather than attempt to re-zero a damaged optic, she mentally calculated the necessary holdover for each distance. "Range is hot," the tower announced. "Prepare for qualification fire." The range fell silent except for the sound of bolts being charged and safeties disengaged. 30 recruits lay prone, weapons aligned with distant targets, tension thick in the humid air. Alex settled into her final position, her body forming a perfect shooting platform despite the unforgiving ground. Her cheek welded to the stock at precisely the same point each time, the foundation of consistency. Her non-dominant hand supported the forend, creating a stable base, while her dominant hand maintained gentle, consistent pressure on the grip. She drew a breath, held it, then exhaled, half finding the respiratory pause where her body was most stable. Her heartbeat slowed further, the space between pulses extending as years of biofeedback training took over. Through the misaligned scope, the target wavered, a combination of heat mirage and the damaged optics. "First firing position," the tower announced. 10 rounds, 10 targets, variable distances from 300 to 800 meters. "On my command, fire!" The range erupted with the staccato rhythm of 30 weapons firing. Most recruits rushed their first shots, anxiety-overwhelming training. Their rifles were bucked against their shoulders, brass ejecting in golden arcs beside them. Alex remained motionless, taking an extra moment to assess environmental conditions. The wind flags at 300, 500, and 700 meters showed a quartering wind from the right at approximately 5 mph, with gusts to 7 mph. The heat mirage indicated rising air currents that would affect bullet drop at longer distances. "Wind call," she whispered to herself, inaudible beneath the gunfire around her. 5 mph, right to left, gusting to 7. Temperature correction plus 2 minutes. Only then did she press the trigger. The first shot broke clean, the rifle's recoil absorbed perfectly by her positioning. Even with the damaged weapon, her form remained textbook perfect, the result of firing hundreds of thousands of rounds under competition conditions. From his observation point, Sullivan tracked the bullet's impact through his spotting scope. "Center mass," he murmured appreciatively. "Perfect adjustment for that piece of junk." Alex worked the bolt smoothly, chambering the next round with practiced efficiency. Her second shot followed 3.2 seconds later, the precise rhythm of Olympic-level precision shooting. The consistency was uncanny, almost mechanical in its perfection. Downrange, the targets told an impossible story. Despite the severely compromised rifle, Alex was placing shot after shot into the center scoring ring. Not just passing shots, but perfect shots, the kind that would be exceptional with a precision-tuned weapon, let alone a battered relic. Lieutenant Davis, observing through binoculars, lowered them slowly in disbelief. "That's not possible," he whispered to himself. By the fifth shot, a small crowd of range officials had gathered behind the shooting line, all focused on Alex's target. The pattern emerging was not just improbable, it was, for all practical purposes, impossible with the weapon she'd been given. All 5 shots had struck within a 1-inch group at 600 meters performance that exceeded factory specifications for a brand new M24, let alone one that should have been scrapped years ago. As Alex prepared for her 6th shot, Sullivan murmured the words that had defined his career as both a combat sniper and a shooting coach. "The first shot may be destiny or disaster. There are no second chances in the real world." It was the fundamental truth of precision shooting in combat scenarios. Unlike competition, where shooters had multiple attempts, combat snipers lived and died by their first shot. Once fired, there was no calling it back, no do-over, no second opportunity. The bullet either hit its mark or it didn't, and the consequences were measured in lives. What Sullivan recognized in Alex's performance wasn't just technical skill, it was the mental discipline to overcome equipment, failure to adapt and compensate to find accuracy where none should exist. These were the qualities that separated shooters from snipers, competitors from operators. As Alex completed her final shot, a strange silence fell over the range. The other recruits had finished their qualification, their scores ranging from marginal to respectable. But all eyes had turned to the small female recruit with the broken rifle. The range officer approached her target, binoculars raised. His voice carried across the suddenly quiet range. 10 shots. Same hole, dead center. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind of quiet that accompanies the impossible becoming reality. Then, like a dam, breaking whispers erupted among the recruits and range staff. Master Sergeant Blackwood stood frozen, his expression unreadable, but his complexion notably paler. From his vantage point, Sullivan tracked the old drill instructor's reaction with particular interest. "Hit a nerve there, didn't she?" Sullivan whispered to himself, noting the way Blackwood's hand unconsciously moved to the scar on his arm, a tell the veteran sniper had observed earlier. Colonel Harrison, who had been observing from the tower, descended the metal stairs with measured steps. His face betrayed nothing, but his pace suggested urgency, masked by military discipline. As the range officer confirmed the impossible score, a buzz of speculation swept through the assembled recruits. Alex remained prone, her face expressionless, as she cleared the weapon, performing the safety checks with meticulous precision. Reynolds, Blackwood's voice had lost its thunderous quality, replaced by something more dangerous. Quiet intensity. "My office, now." As Alex rose and prepared to follow, Blackwood, Harrison intercepted them. "My office, Sergeant. Both of you." The walk to the administration building passed in tense silence, three figures moving across the parade ground under the merciless sun. Behind them, whispered conversations exploded among the recruits, speculation running wild about what they had just witnessed. Lieutenant Davis watched them go, his expression thoughtful. After a moment, he pulled out his phone and made a brief call, his voice too low for anyone nearby to hear. Whatever information he shared prompted an immediate response from the person on the other end, a response that caused Davis to glance sharply at the departing trio before quickly ending the call. What none of them realized was that Sullivan had already disappeared from his observation post, moving with the silent efficiency that had earned him his nickname in the jungles of Vietnam. The ghost was making his way to Harrison's office through routes invisible to casual observation, prepared to join a conversation that would change the course of several lives. The real test was about to begin. Colonel Harrison's office fell silent as the door closed behind Master Sergeant Sullivan. The four occupants regarded each other with varying degrees of tension, Harrison behind his desk, Blackwood standing rigidly at parade rest, Alex at attention, and Sullivan leaning casually against the wall, his relaxed posture at odds with the gravity of the moment. "At ease, Private Reynolds," Harrison said, gesturing to a chair. "I think we can dispense with some of the formalities given the circumstances." Alex hesitated briefly before taking the offered seat, her posture remaining alert despite the nominal relaxation of protocol. Her eyes flickered briefly to Sullivan, recognition flashing across her features before being carefully masked. "Impressive shooting today." Harrison began, his tone conversational, despite the tension in the room. "Some might say impossibly impressive." "Thank you, sir," Alex replied neutrally. "That wasn't a compliment, Reynolds. It was an observation." Harrison leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the desk. No recruit shoots like that, especially not with a weapon in that condition. The base record has stood for 20 years, set by a Delta operator with a custom match-grade rifle. You just shattered it with what amounts to a piece of junk. Blackwood shifted his weight, the floorboards creaking beneath him. "Sir, with respect, there must have been some mistake in the scoring." "There was no mistake, Sergeant," Sullivan interrupted, his Tennessee drawl more pronounced than earlier. "I watched every shot through a loopholed Mark 5 HD spotting scope. 10 rounds, one hole, perfect center mass. I've been watching shooters for 45 years, and I've never seen anything like it." He fixed his gaze on Alex, at least not since Beijing 2008. The room fell silent as the implication settled. "I don't understand, sir," Alex said, maintaining her cover despite the increasingly untenable position. Harrison pulled a file from his desk drawer and opened it, revealing a photograph of Sarah Mitchell receiving an Olympic gold medal. "I think you do, Ms. Mitchell." For several seconds, Alex remained perfectly still, her expression betraying nothing. Then, with a slight movement, she straightened in her chair, a subtle shift in posture that transformed her, as though a mask had been removed to reveal someone altogether different beneath. "How long have you known?" she asked. Her voice changed, more confident, more precise, the careful modulation of her recruit persona abandoned. "Defense Intelligence flagged you yesterday," Harrison replied, "though I suspect Master Sergeant Sullivan here has known considerably longer." Sullivan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Since the moment you picked up that rifle. Your hands gave you away, Sarah. They always do with the best shooters. You can change your name, your hair, even the way you walk, but you can't change 20 years of muscle memory." Blackwood's face had gone through a remarkable transformation, confusion giving way to shock, and then something approaching anger. You're telling me this recruit is Sarah Mitchell, the Olympic shooter? Three-time gold medalist, Sullivan confirmed. 4 world records, the best natural marksman I've seen in my lifetime. He turned to Alex. Though I'm curious why one of the most decorated Olympic athletes in American history is pretending to be a nobody recruit at Fort Bragg. Alex, or Sarah, as they now acknowledged, met his gaze directly. I think you already know, Master Sergeant. You were in Geneva 2 years ago, weren't you? Not as a coach, but as an observer. Sullivan's expression revealed nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. Would someone mind explaining what the hell is going on? Blackwood demanded, his disciplined military bearing temporarily abandoned. Harrison gestured to the chair beside Sarah. Sit down, Sergeant. This conversation involves matters above your clearance level, but given your inadvertent role today, you're now part of it. He turned to Sullivan. I think it's time we brought everyone up to speed, Frank. Sullivan pushed away from the wall and took a position in front of the Harrison's desk facing the others. Despite his age, he moved with the fluid grace of someone half his years, his body honed by decades of physical discipline. Project Sentinel, he began, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. A classified program initiated during the Cold War to identify and recruit civilians with exceptional skills, particularly marksmanship, into specialized military units. Not just good shots, but natural prodigies with abilities that couldn't be taught, only refined. I've never heard of it, Blackwood said, skepticism evident in his voice. That's rather the point of classified, Sergeant, Sullivan replied dryly. Sentinel operated under various cover designations over the years. Its core mission remained constant: find civilians with extraordinary talents and convert them into assets for operations that officially didn't exist. Sarah watched Sullivan carefully, her expression revealing nothing as he continued. In the early days, we recruited competition shooters, Olympic athletes, even hunters with exceptional skills. Later, we expanded to other specialties, languages, mathematics, pattern recognition. The program produced some of the most effective operators in American military history, though you'll never find their names in any record. And Reynolds is part of this program, Blackwood asked, glancing at the woman beside him with new awareness. That's where things get complicated, Harrison interjected. Ms. Mitchell wasn't officially recruited. She found her way to us through unconventional channels, enlisted under a false identity, and has been hiding in plain sight within my command for the past 5 months. He fixed Sarah with a steady gaze, which raises several important questions about her motives. Sarah remained silent for a moment, weighing her response. Geneva, she finally said. It starts and ends with Geneva. Sullivan nodded as though confirming a long-held suspicion. The World Championship exhibition, your last public appearance, where I missed an impossible shot and my spotter ended up dead in a car accident 12 hours later. Sarah added, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. Captain Thomas Reed, 28 years old, Bronze Star recipient from Afghanistan. Someone sabotaged my rifle, and when he discovered evidence of tampering, they killed him. Blackwood's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. Who's they? That's what I came to find out, Sarah replied. After Reed's death, I started digging, found references to a classified program recruiting top civilian marksmen, discovered that 3 other Olympic athletes with military connections had died under suspicious circumstances in the 18 months prior. When I tried to bring this information to military intelligence, I hit walls everywhere. So you created a new identity and enlisted, Harrison finished, planning to investigate from the inside. It was the only way, Sarah confirmed. Someone is targeting Sentinel assets, past and present. The evidence pointed to the source being within the military itself, someone with access and authority. I needed to find them before they found me. The office fell silent as the implications settled. Blackwood looked between Harrison and Sullivan, clearly processing this new information against his previous interactions with the recruit he'd singled out for harsh treatment. If what you're saying is true, CEO, Harrison said carefully, then you've placed yourself in considerable danger by coming here, particularly after today's display on the range. I didn't have much choice with the rifle I was given, Sarah replied, glancing at Blackwood, though I suspect that was part of someone's plan. All eyes turned to Blackwood, whose expression hardened. Now wait just a damn minute. I was following orders to test her capabilities. Colonel Harrison specifically instructed me to challenge Reynolds with the damaged rifle. At the recommendation of Lieutenant Colonel Carter from Defense Intelligence, Harrison added, who arrived yesterday specifically to discuss Reynolds or Mitchell, as we now know. Sullivan straightened, suddenly alert. William Carter was here yesterday. Harrison nodded. He brought the Sentinel file, identified Mitchell, requested we test her capabilities before making an approach. A shadow passed over Sullivan's weathered features. Carter wasn't authorized for that disclosure. He's not cleared for active Sentinel operations. What are you saying, Frank? Harrison asked, tension evident in his voice. I'm saying, Sullivan replied slowly, that we may have identified our leak. He turned to Sarah. Carter was in Geneva as military liaison to the U.S. Olympic Committee. He had access to your equipment before the final round. Sarah's eyes widened with recognition. The man with the clipboard, he inspected all the rifles before the final standard security protocol. Her voice hardened. He sabotaged my weapon and then killed Reed when he discovered evidence. And now he's identified you here, Harrison concluded grimly, which means your cover is completely blown. Blackwood, who had been listening intently, suddenly stood. Sir, if Carter was here yesterday and knew Reynolds Mitchell would be exposing her skills today, we need to consider the possibility that he's still on base, or has assets here. Sergeant Blackwood is right, Sullivan agreed. Carter wouldn't have arranged this test without having contingencies in place. He's had 24 hours to position resources. Harrison reached for his secure phone. I'll order a security lockdown and have Carter detained if he's still on base. It's too late for that, a new voice announced from the doorway. All heads turned to see Lieutenant Davis standing in the entrance, a pistol held casually at his side. Carter left last night, but he didn't go alone. Davis closed the door behind him, his weapon now clearly trained on the room's occupants. Hands where I can see them, everyone. This conversation has gone far enough. Davis, Harrison said calmly, his hands visible on the desk. You're making a serious mistake. With respect, Colonel, I'm preventing one. Davis kept the pistol steady, his stance revealing professional training beyond standard military protocols. This situation has been compromised beyond recovery. Sullivan remained motionless, his veteran's eyes assessing Davis with cold calculation. KGB methodology, he observed as though commenting on the weather. Or I should say former KGB. The Russians abandoned that particular stance training after '91, but it remains popular with private contractors from the old Warsaw Pact countries. Davis's expression flickered briefly, surprise quickly masked by professional composure. Impressive observation, Master Sergeant. Your reputation is well earned. How long have you been working for them? Sarah asked, her voice controlled despite the tension coiling through her body. That's a complicated question, Davis replied. Let's just say some loyalties transcend national boundaries and temporary allegiances. Blackwood shifted slightly in his chair, a movement Davis immediately checked with a gesture of his weapon. I wouldn't, Sergeant. Despite our time together in training, I won't hesitate to shoot if necessary. What's the play here, Lieutenant? Harrison asked, deliberately drawing Davis's attention. You can't expect to neutralize all of us and simply walk away. I don't need to neutralize everyone, Davis answered. Just her. He nodded toward Sarah. The others are unfortunately collateral concerns at this point. Sullivan's weathered face revealed nothing, but his mind was racing through scenarios, calculating angles and distances with the precision that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Vietnam. You're part of the cleanup crew, he said, keeping Davis engaged. The one that handled Captain Reed after Geneva. Reed was careless, Davis confirmed. He discovered evidence that should have remained hidden, just as Mitchell here has been careless in her investigation. This is about more than eliminating Sentinel assets, Sarah realized aloud. You're protecting something bigger. Davis smiled thinly. Very good. Always the quick study, one of the qualities that made you such an exceptional shooter. He checked his watch. We have approximately 3 minutes before base security responds to the alert Colonel Harrison triggered under his desk. That gives us just enough time to conclude our business. Sullivan caught Sarah's eye for a fraction of a second, a silent communication between 2 marksmen that conveyed volumes. In that momentary exchange, an understanding passed between them, a coordination born of shared expertise. Before you pull that trigger, Sullivan said, drawing Davis's attention, you might want to consider the broader implications. The Sentinel program isn't just about recruiting exceptional talent, it's about creating a particular type of operative, one with certain insurance protocols. Davis hesitated, his expression cautious. Explain. Kill a Sentinel asset and certain information automatically releases to multiple intelligence agencies. Sullivan lied smoothly. Dead man switches, Lieutenant, standard procedure since '89. He's stalling, Blackwood muttered, earning a sharp glance from Davis. Maybe, Davis conceded, but it doesn't change the operational parameters. Mitchell has identified connections that threaten ongoing operations. That cannot be permitted. These ongoing operations, Harrison said carefully, they involve former Warsaw Pact intelligence assets targeting American military personnel. Davis's smile was cold. The Cold War never really ended, Colonel. It just privatized. While Davis's attention was on Harrison, Sarah had been making minute adjustments to her position, invisible to casual observation, but clear to Sullivan's experienced eye. She was setting up, preparing for explosive movement with the same methodical precision she applied to marksmanship. You mentioned other Olympic athletes who died, Blackwood said unexpectedly, joining the effort to keep Davis talking. Were they also potential Sentinel recruits? Not all, Davis replied. Some were simply loose ends from past operations. Others were collateral damage to maintain operational security. Like Michael Torres, Sarah interjected. Olympic swimmer died in a training accident last year. Or Elena Vasquez, gold medalist in biathlon, killed in a home invasion that was never solved. Davis nodded approvingly. Your research was more thorough than we anticipated. Torres was particularly unfortunate. He wasn't even a target initially, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Carter Sullivan pressed. Where does a defense intelligence officer fit into this network of former Warsaw Pact operatives? Carter is a facilitator. Davis explained, his confidence growing as he controlled the conversation. There are many like him within your government, men who recognize which way the wind was blowing after the wall fell. The smart ones secured their futures by building relationships with the networks they once opposed. As Davis spoke, Sarah's muscles tensed imperceptibly, the same controlled preparation she used before breaking a shot. Sullivan, recognizing the signs, prepared his own response. You still haven't explained the endgame, Harrison said, maintaining Davis's focus. What's worth compromising your oath and career for permanence? Money initially, Davis admitted. But eventually you realize it's about being on the right side of history. Nation-states are increasingly irrelevant, Colonel. The future belongs to private networks with the right resources and connections. He checked his watch again. And now I'm afraid our time is up. As Davis's attention shifted to his watch, Sarah exploded into motion, launching herself laterally from the chair with the explosive power of an Olympic athlete. Simultaneously, Sullivan swept a heavy paperweight from Harrison's desk with surprising speed for his age, sending it hurtling toward Davis's weapon hand. The coordination was perfect, two elite performers executing under pressure. The paperweight struck Davis's hand just as he was reacquiring his aim, the impact sending the pistol off target as he fired. The bullet buried itself in the wall inches from where Sarah had been sitting a split second earlier. Before Davis could recover, Blackwood was in motion as well. Decades of combatives training overcoming the stiffness of age. He drove his shoulder into Davis's midsection with the focused power of a former boxer, carrying them both into the door with a splintering crash. The pistol clattered to the floor as the two men grappled. Despite his age, Blackwood moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent a lifetime in hand-to-hand combat scenarios. His weathered hands found leverage points, applying pressure to nerve clusters that ordinary soldiers wouldn't know existed. Davis was younger and quicker, but Blackwood's experience proved decisive. A precisely applied thumb strike to a pressure point beneath Davis's jaw caused momentary neural disruption, enough for Sullivan to retrieve the fallen weapon and Harrison to activate the office emergency alarm. Within seconds, the office door burst open and security forces flooded in, weapons drawn. Davis, now subdued on the floor with Blackwood's knee firmly planted in his back, glared up at Sarah with cold hatred. You have no idea what you've started, he hissed through bloodied lips. Carter isn't alone. The network goes deeper than you can imagine. As security personnel secured Davis, Harrison turned to Sullivan and Sarah. We need to move quickly. If Carter has compromised Sentinel, there may be others at risk. Sullivan nodded grimly. We need a secure location to debrief and develop a response plan. This goes beyond a simple security breach. Blackwood, breathing heavily from the exertion, rose from where he had pinpointed Davis. For a moment, he regarded Sarah with an unreadable expression, the drill instructor's mask completely fallen away. "I owe you an apology, Mitchell," he said finally. "I've been riding you for months, and it turns out you're—" He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "Just a soldier trying to do her job, Sergeant," Sarah replied quietly. "No different from anyone else here." Sullivan watched this exchange with interest, his weathered face revealing a hint of approval. "Not quite, Sarah. Your sentinel material, whether you came through official channels or not." Harrison issued rapid orders to the security team before turning back to the others. "We need to move to the secure briefing room in the basement. Sullivan, I want a full briefing on sentinel operations past and present. Mitchell, everything you've discovered about these targeted killings." Blackwood. He paused, considering the sergeant's position in this rapidly evolving situation. "Blackwood stays with us," Sullivan interjected firmly. "He's earned the right to be part of this, and we need every trustworthy asset available." As they prepared to depart for the secure facility, Harrison regarded Sullivan with new awareness. "You seem to have significant authority within Sentinel, Frank. More than your retired status would suggest." Sullivan's smile held decades of secrets. "Sentinel operators never truly retire, Colonel. We just move to different phases of operation." He glanced at Sarah. "Something Ms. Mitchell here is about to discover firsthand." "Before we go," Sarah said, her voice taking on a new urgency, "there's something you should know about Davis. He's not just a random asset in this conspiracy." "What do you mean?" Blackwood asked. "When he mentioned Michael Torres, he revealed something he shouldn't have known," Sarah explained. "Torres wasn't publicly connected to any military program. His death was reported as a training accident. The military connection was never established in any public record." Harrison's expression darkened, meaning Davis had inside knowledge of the operation. "More than that," Sullivan concluded, "it means he was directly involved in Torres's death. We're not dealing with a low-level asset. Davis is a key operative in whatever this network is doing." As they moved toward the secure facility escorted by armed security personnel, Blackwood fell into step beside Sarah. "20 years in the service," he said quietly, "and I've never seen shooting like yours today. Not once." "Just application of fundamentals, Sergeant," she replied modestly, "something you have been drilling into us for months." "Fundamentals don't explain putting 10 rounds through the same hole with a damaged rifle," Blackwood countered. "That was something else entirely." Sullivan, overhearing this exchange, dropped back to join them. "It's called natural talent, Sergeant Blackwood, the kind that can't be taught or created through training. It's why Sentinel exists, to find those rare individuals with abilities beyond the norm and deploy them where they can make the most difference." Blackwood's expression shifted, a complex emotion crossing his weathered features. "I was evaluated for a special program back in '85, he said after a moment. "Some classified shooting assessment at Fort Benning. Never knew what it was for. They just told me I didn't qualify and sent me back to my unit." Sullivan studied him with new interest. "Sentinel Preliminary Evaluation Phase 1. I remember your file, Sergeant. Exceptional technical skills, but some concerns about psychological profiles under certain stress conditions." "I was young and hot-headed," Blackwood admitted. "Failed the impulse control scenarios, I'd guess." "You weren't rejected because you lacked ability," Sullivan clarified. "You were directed to a different path where your particular skills could be better utilized. The Army needed exceptional drill instructors as much as it needed specialized operators." As they descended into the secure underground facility, Sarah considered these revelations with growing understanding. The conspiracy that had claimed Reed's life and threatened her own was more extensive than she had imagined, reaching back decades and penetrating multiple levels of military and intelligence organizations. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing had become abundantly clear. Her decision to enlist under a false identity had placed her at the center of a conspiracy with roots in the Cold War and branches extending into the present. The skills that had earned her Olympic gold would now be tested in a very different arena, one where the targets shot back and failure meant more than just losing a medal. The real test was just beginning. The assembly hall at Fort Bragg fell silent as Master Sergeant Robert Blackwood took the podium. 3 days had passed since the arrest of Lieutenant Davis, 3 days of intense investigation and heightened security throughout the base. The recruits sat in perfect formation, their expressions a mixture of confusion and anticipation. None of them fully understood why they had been summoned for this special assembly, but rumors had spread like wildfire since the qualification day incident. The hall itself was a testament to military tradition. Walls adorned with the unit colors and battle streamers of generations past, plaques commemorating fallen soldiers, and photographs of commanding officers stretching back decades. Morning light filtered through high windows, creating shafts of illumination that cut through the otherwise dim interior. Blackwood stood ramrod straight behind the podium, his weathered face set in uncharacteristic solemnity. Gone was the thunderous drill instructor persona that had terrified recruits for decades. In its place stood something more complex, a veteran soldier preparing to acknowledge a profound mistake. "At ease," he commanded, his voice carrying to the back of the hall without the need for the microphone before him. The recruits settled into parade rest, their eyes fixed forward, bodies still but minds racing. "For 23 years," Blackwood began, "I have stood on this base and trained soldiers. Some of you may have heard that before I became an instructor, I served with the 7th Special Forces Group and later with the 75th Ranger Regiment during Operation Desert Storm." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled recruits. "What you don't know, what nobody here knows, is why I left field operations for training." A palpable tension filled the room. Blackwood had never discussed his personal history with recruits. The sudden departure from protocol signaled something momentous. "In 1985, I was selected for evaluation for a specialized program," he continued, "a program so classified that even its name was compartmentalized. I believed with the arrogance of youth and combat experience that I would excel. I didn't." His voice hardened with the memory. "I failed the psychological assessment portion, was deemed unsuitable for operations requiring certain mental attributes." Blackwood's hand unconsciously moved to the scar on his forearm, tracing its length as he spoke. "That failure haunted me for decades. It bred a resentment toward those who possessed naturally what I could not achieve through training and willpower alone. That resentment became a cornerstone of my teaching philosophy, pushed the recruits beyond breaking proof that discipline and hard work trump natural talent." From her seat in the front row, Alexandra Reynolds, now officially recognized as Sarah Mitchell, watched Blackwood with new understanding. His treatment of her over the past months suddenly contextualized in ways she hadn't anticipated. "3 days ago," Blackwood continued, "Private Reynolds demonstrated something extraordinary on our firing range. Using a weapon that by all rights should have been incapable of precision fire, she achieved a perfect score that shattered a 20-year base record." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as recruits exchanged glances. Most had heard about the incident, though the details had grown increasingly distorted with each retelling. "What many of you don't know is that Private Reynolds is not who she claimed to be." Blackwood's eyes found Sarah's. "With her permission and by order of Colonel Harrison, I can now tell you that she is Sarah Mitchell, 3-time Olympic gold medalist in precision shooting and one of the most decorated marksmen in American history." The hall erupted in whispers and exclamations of surprise. Several recruits turned to stare openly at Sarah, who maintained her military bearing despite the sudden attention. "Ms. Mitchell enlisted under an assumed identity as part of a classified operation that I am not at liberty to fully disclose. However, what I can and must disclose is my own failure, not the one from 1980, but the one that has defined my recent actions." Blackwood stepped from behind the podium, moving to stand directly before the recruits without the barrier of formality. "I recognized something in Private Reynolds from the first day, something I couldn't quite identify, but that triggered my deepest insecurities. I singled her out, pushed her harder than the others, and ultimately attempted to humiliate her with that broken rifle on qualification day." His voice dropped, becoming more personal, despite the size of the assembly. "What I've failed to understand for 20 years is that exceptional talent deserves respect, not resentment. That natural ability combined with disciplined training represents the highest potential of a soldier, not a threat to those of us who must rely more heavily on experience and determination." From a side entrance, Master Sergeant Sullivan emerged, joined by Colonel Harrison. They moved quietly to positions at the side of the stage, observing but not interrupting Blackwood's moment of reckoning. "I owe Private Reynolds, Ms. Mitchell, a public apology," Blackwood continued. "Not just for my treatment of her during training, but for what that treatment represents, the small-minded fear that someone else's excellence somehow diminishes our own worth. Sarah stood the movement, drawing all eyes in the hall. "Permission to speak, Sergeant," she requested formally. Blackwood nodded, surrendering the floor with a gesture. Sarah moved to the front with the balanced grace that had always set her apart even when she was trying to blend in. Standing before the assembly, she appeared transformed, no longer the anonymous recruit, but not quite the Olympic champion either. Something new had emerged from the crucible of the past weeks. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Until recently, I was known to you as Alexandra Reynolds. The reasons for my deception were rooted in necessity, but that doesn't make the falsehood any easier to acknowledge." She looked around the hall, making eye contact with those who had been her fellow recruits, men and women, with whom she had shared the grueling challenges of training. "What Sergeant Blackwood didn't tell you is why I left competitive shooting to enlist under an assumed name. The official story released to the press was that I was taking a break after years of competition. The truth is more complicated." Sarah described the events in Geneva: the sabotaged rifle, the missed shot that had been mechanically impossible for a weapon of that caliber in her hands, the death of Captain Reed after he discovered evidence of tampering. "I didn't come to Fort Bragg to escape my past," she explained. "I came to find answers, to understand who had targeted Reed, and why, to discover the connection between his death and those of other Olympic athletes with military connections." Sullivan stepped forward, then taking position beside Sarah with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to command without requiring formal authority. "What Private Mitchell discovered," he said, his Tennessee accent more pronounced in the acoustics of the hall, "was a conspiracy reaching back to the Cold War, a network of former Warsaw Pact intelligence operatives and compromised American assets targeting a classified program known as Sentinel." Sullivan explained the program's history in broad strokes: its origin as a recruitment pipeline for civilians with exceptional abilities, particularly marksmanship; its evolution through decades of shifting geopolitical landscapes; its successes and occasional failures. "For 30 years," Sullivan continued, "I've been identifying and recruiting potential Sentinel operatives. Sarah Mitchell was on our radar since she was 14 years old, demonstrating abilities that couldn't be taught, only refined and directed." He turned to face the assembled recruits directly. "The exceptional score she achieved on qualification day wasn't just impressive, it was statistically impossible with that damaged weapon. What you witnessed was the combination of natural talent, honed by years of disciplined training, the exact qualities Sentinel was designed to identify and develop." As Sullivan spoke, Sarah observed the reactions among the recruits. Some displayed open awe, others skepticism, and a very few, something that looked remarkably like recognition. Her eyes lingered on these last individuals, wondering if there were other special talents hiding in plain sight among the ranks. Colonel Harrison joined them at the front, his presence adding official weight to the proceedings. "3 days ago," he announced, "we apprehended Lieutenant Michael Davis after he revealed himself as part of this conspiracy. Intelligence gathered from his interrogation has exposed a network of operatives within multiple military installations, including Fort Bragg." A tense silence fell over the assembly. The implication that enemies might exist within their own ranks struck at the foundation of military trust and cohesion. "We believe additional compromised personnel remain active on this base," Harrison continued, "which is why we've implemented enhanced security protocols and why this briefing is taking place. Each of you will be interviewed by counterintelligence officers as part of our ongoing investigation." Sarah stepped forward again, her expression solemn. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice carrying the weight of personal responsibility. "The shot I missed in Geneva, the one that led to Captain Reed's death, wasn't just a professional failure. It cost the life of an American soldier who was doing his duty." Her composure wavered slightly, a rare crack in her disciplined exterior. "Reed wasn't just my spotter for that exhibition. He was gathering intelligence on suspected foreign operatives at the competition. When I missed that shot, attention focused on my equipment. Reed discovered the sabotage and was killed before he could report it." The hall remained silent, the recruits absorbing this revelation with the gravity it deserved. "I enlisted because I owed a debt," Sarah continued. "Not just to find Reed's killers, but to complete the mission he died for, to expose the network targeting Sentinel assets and ensure no more lives were lost to this conspiracy." As she finished speaking, Blackwood returned to the podium, his weathered face set with new purpose. The investigation is ongoing, he announced. But one thing has become clear: the threat we face isn't just external. It exists within our ranks, hiding behind uniforms identical to your own. He scanned the assembly, his gaze penetrating and deliberate. Trust your instincts. Report unusual behavior through secure channels. Remember that vigilance is the price of security. As the assembly concluded and the recruits filed out, Sarah remained near the stage with Sullivan, Harrison, and Blackwood. The four of them, Olympic champion, veteran sniper base commander, and drill instructor, formed an unlikely alliance forged through crisis and revelation. They took it better than I expected, Harrison observed, watching the last recruits depart. Soldiers adapt, Blackwood replied. It's what we train them to do. Sullivan's weathered face creased with concern. Davis was mid-level at best. The real threat remains at large. Sarah nodded in agreement. He mentioned Carter, but I doubt he's the top. This network has survived for decades by maintaining cutouts and compartmentalization. Which brings us to our next steps, Harrison said, turning to face the group. Sullivan has temporary reactivation orders from JSOC. Mitchell has been officially assigned to Sentinel operational status, bypassing traditional recruitment protocols. And me? Blackwood asked, his expression revealing nothing. You're being temporarily attached to Sentinel as security liaison, Harrison answered. Given your history with the program, successful or not, and your combat experience, you're uniquely positioned to assist. Sullivan checked his watch, his expression growing more serious. We should move to the secure facility. The extraction team will have reached Carter by now and will want to be on the secure line for his initial interrogation. As they prepared to depart, Sarah felt a presence behind her and turned to find a young recruit. Private Wilson, one of the few who had shown her kindness during training, standing at parade rest. Permission to speak, ma'am, he requested formally. Granted, Wilson, and it's still just Mitchell. The rank hasn't changed. Wilson nodded, then asked the question that clearly burned in him. Was it all an act? Everything during training, the struggles with rucking, the difficulty with land navigation, was it all just cover? Sarah considered her answer carefully. The struggles were real, Wilson. Being good at one thing doesn't make you good at everything. I really did need your help with land nav. A smile broke across Wilson's face, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. So I taught an Olympic champion something. More than you know, she confirmed. As Wilson departed, Blackwood fell into step beside Sarah. He's right to be proud, the old sergeant said quietly. Teaching is its own kind of excellence. Together they moved toward the secure facility, unaware that the revelation in the assemblies hall had set in motion events that would soon test them all in ways none had anticipated. The enemy, having lost the element of surprise, would now be forced to act more boldly and perhaps more desperately. The storm was gathering. The first explosion ripped through the motor pool at 02:03 hours, transforming a row of Humvees into twisted metal and billowing flames that illuminated the pre-dawn darkness over Fort Bragg. The second blast followed seconds later, taking out the base's primary communications tower in a shower of sparks and debris. By the third explosion, this one at the main power station, the base alarm was wailing across the compound, its urgent howl cutting through the chaos of fire and destruction. Inside the secure underground facility beneath the administration building, Sarah Mitchell jolted awake on the cot where she'd been sleeping. The reinforced concrete walls muffled the explosions at distant thumps, but the flashing emergency lights and blaring internal alarm left no doubt the base was under attack. Master Sergeant Sullivan was already on his feet, moving with the practiced efficiency of a veteran soldier. Despite his 65 years, he transitioned from sleep to full alertness without the grogginess that afflicted younger men. They're making their play, he said, grabbing his tactical vest and checking the sidearm holstered within it. Sooner than expected. Sarah pulled on her boots, mind racing through scenarios and responses. Taking out communications, first standard procedure for a decapitation strike. They're trying to isolate the command structure. The secure phone on the wall rang with a harsh electronic tone. Sullivan answered, listened briefly, then hung up. Harrison's activating the contingency protocol, he reported. All personnel to designated rally points. Security teams deploying to critical infrastructure. The door to their secure room opened, revealing Blackwood in full battle gear, tactical vest over his uniform, Shro M4 carbine, at the ready sidearm on his hip. The old drill instructor's face was set with grim determination, the lines of age seemingly erased by the familiar rhythm of combat preparation. Perimeter breach on the north fence line, he reported. Multiple hostiles with military-grade weapons and night vision. Base security is engaging, but they're outnumbered and facing superior firepower. Mercenaries, Sarah asked, strapping on her own tactical gear. Looks that way, Blackwood confirmed. Professional equipment coordinated movements. These aren't amateurs. Sullivan checked the secure terminal in the corner accessing the base's surveillance system. Most cameras were offline, but a few still transmitted, showing armored figures moving with tactical precision through the compound engaging security forces with disciplined fire and movement techniques. Former Special Forces, Sullivan assessed studying their movements. Eastern European by the look of those tactics. Probably ex-Spetsnaz or similar units now working private contract. An explosion larger than the previous ones rocked the building above them, causing dust to sift down from the ceiling. They're targeting the administration building, Blackwood said. They know we're here. Carter must have talked, Sullivan concluded grimly, or they had a deeper asset than Davis. Sarah finished checking her equipment, the movement's automatic after months of training. What's the play? Sullivan turned from the monitor, his weathered face set with the calm determination that had carried him through 3 tours in Vietnam and countless classified operations since. They're expecting us to bunker down here standard protocol for high-value assets during a base attack. That makes this facility their primary target. He gestured to a tactical map of the base on the wall. We need to move to secondary position, Alpha link up with Harrison's security detail, and coordinate a counteroffensive. Through a base crawling with hostiles, Blackwood questioned, though his tone suggested strategic assessment rather than doubt. Precisely because of that, Sullivan replied. They'll have their heaviest forces concentrated here. The route to Alpha will be less defended. Sarah studied the map, tracing potential movement corridors with her finger. Service tunnels connect this building to the medical facility, then it's 300 meters overground to reach Alpha at the training center. Tunnels will be their secondary approach vector, Blackwood pointed out. They'll have teams there too. But not their best, Sullivan countered. Their elites will be hitting the front door and roof access points. A decision crystallized in Sarah's mind. If we're moving, we need to move now. Every minute gives them time to establish more complete control of the base. Sullivan nodded approvingly. Mitchell's right. Gear up for close quarters. Blackwood, take point through the tunnels. You know them better than we do. I'll cover our 6. Mitchell in the middle with the specialized equipment. Specialized equipment? Sarah questioned. Sullivan moved to a weapons locker in the corner, entering a complex code into the digital lock. The heavy door swung open to reveal an array of advanced weaponry, not standard to any military unit, prototype designs, and modified systems that existed outside normal procurement channels. He removed a rifle case and handed it to Sarah. Sentinel keeps certain assets reserved for contingencies. This is one of them. Sarah opened the case to find a weapon she'd never seen before, a bullpup design sniper rifle with an advanced optics package and suppressor system. XM2100 prototype, Sullivan explained. Carbon fiber barrel with programmable rifling adjustment, integrated ballistic computer and variable power electro-optical scope. Only 3 exist outside of DARPA laboratories. Sarah lifted the weapon, feeling its perfect balance and ergonomics, as though it had been designed specifically for her dimensions and preferences. It has, Sullivan confirmed, reading her expression. Sentinel had it built to your specifications based on telemetry from your Olympic performances. It's been waiting for you to join the program officially. The implications of this revelation that Sentinel had been preparing for her recruitment years before she'd ever heard of the program would have to wait for another time. The immediate crisis demanded their full attention. Blackwood checked the corridor outside their secure room, then motioned them forward. Clear for now. Tunnel access is 2 levels down. They moved through the deserted hallways of the underground facility with practiced efficiency, Blackwood on point weapon, up and scanning for threats. Sarah in the middle, the prototype rifle held at the ready, Sullivan covering their rear, his experienced eyes missing nothing as they advanced. The distant sounds of gunfire and explosions filtered down from above, accompanied by the muffled thump of boots as security forces moved through the building. They reached the access point to the service tunnels, a heavy steel door with both electronic and mechanical locks. Blackwood entered his command override code, then used his physical key for the mechanical system. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a dimly lit concrete passage stretching into darkness. Motion sensors are down, Blackwood reported after checking the security panel. No way to know if they're already in the tunnel system. Assume they are, Sullivan advised. Advance accordingly. They entered the tunnel moving in tactical formation, keeping optimal spacing for mutual support, while maintaining silent communication through hand signals. The passage was utilitarian concrete pipes and conduits running along the ceiling, emergency lights casting harsh shadows every 20 meters. Sarah's senses heightened with the familiar focus of competition shooting, but channeled now toward potential threats rather than stationary targets. Every shadow, every junction became a point of assessment and decision. The specialized training she'd received during the past months integrated seamlessly with her natural abilities, creating a heightened awareness that processed information faster than conscious thought. They had progressed approximately 200 meters when Sarah detected a subtle change in the air current, a slight disturbance that shouldn't exist in the sealed tunnel system. She raised her fist in the universal signal to halt, then pointed toward the junction ahead. Blackwood acknowledged with a nod, then used hand signals to indicate their response. He would provide covering fire while Sarah and Sullivan flanked through an adjacent maintenance passage. Before they could execute the plan, multiple shadows detached from the darkness ahead, 5 figures in tactical gear, moving with the coordinated precision of veteran operators. The enemy team had been waiting in ambush position, their thermal imaging equipment likely having detected the approaching heat signatures. Contact front, Blackwood called, dropping to one knee and bringing his M4 to bear. The tunnel erupted in gunfire muzzle flashes strobing in the confined space. Blackwood's first burst caught the lead hostile center mass, dropping him instantly. The remaining attackers scattered to firing positions, returning disciplined fire that forced the trio to seek cover behind concrete support pillars. 4 hostiles, professional equipment, coordinated fire. Sullivan assessed calmly as though narrating a training exercise rather than a life-or-death engagement. Mitchell, can you get an angle? Sarah had already assessed the geometry of the tunnel and identified a potential solution. A ventilation grate in the ceiling offered a reflection point that might provide a firing angle on the enemy position. I need covering fire on my mark, she replied, adjusting her position to bring the XM2100 to bear on the reflection point. The advanced optics automatically compensated for the indirect fire calculation, the integrated ballistic computer providing adjustment data for the unusual shot. 3-2-1 mark. Sullivan and Blackwood laid down simultaneous suppressing fire, forcing the hostiles to duck behind their cover. In that moment, Sarah fired 2 rapid shots, not at the enemies directly, but at the precise angle needed to ricochet bullets off the ventilation grate and into the space behind the hostiles' cover. The precision was extraordinary, a shot that combined the mathematics of ballistics with the instinctive feel of a natural marksman. 2 hostiles dropped immediately, the redirected bullets finding gaps in their body armor that direct fire could never have reached. Moving, Blackwood called, advancing rapidly, while the remaining hostiles were still processing what had happened. Sullivan followed his own fire, precise and economical, the practiced efficiency of a veteran sniper who never wasted a round. Between them, they eliminated the remaining threats before Sarah had even moved from her position. Clear, Blackwood announced after checking the downed hostiles. European mercs, high-end gear. Exactly what we expected. Sullivan knelt beside one of the fallen attackers, examining the tactical equipment. Russian-made thermal optics, latest generation. Communication gear encrypted to military standards. These aren't just hired guns, they're sponsored by someone with serious resources. We need to keep moving, Sarah urged, already scanning ahead for the next potential threat. That firefight wasn't quiet. They'll send reinforcements. They continued through the tunnel system with increased urgency, encountering 2 more hostile teams before reaching the exit point beneath the medical facility. Each engagement followed a similar pattern, Blackwood's aggressive combat experience, combining with Sullivan's tactical precision and Sarah's extraordinary marksmanship to overcome numerically superior forces. The final approach to the exit involved a 50-meter straightaway with minimal cover, a killing zone if hostiles were waiting. Sullivan signaled for a halt, then produced a small fiber optic camera from his gear, threading it through a ventilation duct to get a view of the area ahead. 2 sentries at the exit, plus what looks like a demolition package on the door, he reported. They're planning to seal the tunnels. We don't have time to find another route, Blackwood pointed out. Base security will be getting overwhelmed topside. Sarah had been studying the tunnel configuration, calculating angles and distances. I can take them both with subsonic rounds through the ventilation system. They won't hear the shots until it's too late. Sullivan considered this, then nodded. Do it. Sarah positioned herself beneath a ventilation grate, aligning the XM2100 to fire upward into the duct system. The advanced scope automatically adjusted for the unusual firing angle, providing ballistic solutions for the complex shot. Sending diagnostics, she whispered, activating the rifle's integrated rangefinder. The scope display showed the calculated path, a shot that would travel up through the ventilation system, make two right-angle turns through the ductwork, and emerge precisely where the hostiles stood guard. It was a shot that required absolute precision, accounting for bullet drop friction loss from contact with the duct surfaces and the reduced velocity of subsonic ammunition. Sarah controlled her breathing, found her center, and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. The suppressed rifle made little more than a soft coughing sound, the subsonic rounds traveling without the characteristic crack of supersonic ammunition. Through the fiber optic feed, they watched both sentries drop simultaneously, neither having time to react or alert others. Clear to move, Sullivan confirmed after verifying through the camera that no other hostiles were present. They advanced to the exit, Blackwood quickly disarming the demolition package on the door, his experience from Desert Storm evident in the efficient way he neutralized the sophisticated explosive device. Russian equipment again, he noted. Military grade, not commercial. The door opened to reveal the basement level of the medical facility, deserted, now the staff having evacuated to secure areas when the attack began. Emergency lighting cast an eerie glow over abandoned treatment areas and medical equipment. 300 meters to Alpha Pay, Sullivan reminded them, checking the tactical map on his wrist display. Across open ground with minimal cover. From somewhere above came the sound of gunfire, sharp and immediate, not the distant echoes from before. The battle had reached the medical facility. We need a diversion, Blackwood assessed. Something to draw attention away from our movement to Alpha. Sarah studied the building schematic on Sullivan's display, an idea forming. The oxygen storage facility on the east side. If properly detonated, it would create a significant distraction without endangering patients. Sullivan nodded approvingly. Blackwood, can you rig something with the demo package we confiscated? Give me 3 minutes, the veteran sergeant confirmed, already unpacking the explosive device they'd taken from the tunnel door. While Blackwood worked, Sarah and Sullivan moved to a window overlooking the compound, assessing the situation outside. The base was in chaos, fires burning at multiple locations, security forces engaged in firefights with hostile teams, the night sky illuminated by flares and tracer fire. They came in force, Sullivan observed grimly. At least 30 professionals, maybe more. This isn't just about us anymore, they're making a statement. A statement to whom? Sarah asked. To whoever might be thinking about reactivating Sentinel, Sullivan replied. This is a warning shot across the hishes of the bow of the entire program. Blackwood joined them, the modified explosive device assembled and ready, set for a 2-minute delay. That gives us time to reach the east exit and make our move toward Alpha during the confusion. They moved through the deserted facility with practiced stealth, avoiding 2 hostile teams conducting room-clearing operations on the upper floors. Blackwood placed the explosive device in the oxygen storage area, set the timer, and they proceeded to the east exit. 90 seconds to detonation, he reported, as they took position at the door, surveying the open ground they would need to cross. The training center that housed Position Alpha was visible approximately 300 meters away, a low concrete building designed to withstand explosive ordnance testing. Between their position and that relative safety lay exposed ground illuminated by burning vehicles and emergency lights. We'll need to split up, Sullivan decided. 3 targets moving together are easier to engage than 3 moving independently. Converge at the east entrance to Alpha. Sarah checked the XM2100, ensuring it was ready for rapid deployment if needed. I'll take the central approach, provide covering fire if either of you encounters resistance. Sullivan nodded. Blackwood, swing wide right. I'll go left. Mitchell has overwatch. The explosion, when it came, was more substantial than anticipated, the oxygen tanks detonating with a thunderous roar that sent a fireball climbing into the night sky. The shock wave rattled windows throughout the compound, and as planned, hostile forces began redirecting toward the blast. Move now, Sullivan ordered. They burst from the exit, each taking their designated route across the open ground. Sarah advanced in a combat crouch, the XM-2100 at the ready, her eyes constantly scanning for threats as she moved from cover to cover. Decades of competitive shooting had honed her ability to control her breathing and heart rate, even during physical exertion, a skill now proving invaluable in combat. Sullivan moved with the practiced efficiency of a veteran operator, his age seemingly irrelevant as he covered ground with tactical precision. Blackwood, despite his years as an instructor rather than a field operator, demonstrated that combat skills once mastered never truly faded, flowing from position to position with fluid economy of movement. They had covered approximately half the distance when the first hostile team spotted them, four operatives emerging from between buildings to the north, immediately opening fire. Sarah dropped to a prone position behind a concrete barrier, bringing the XM-2100 to bear with practiced speed. The advanced optics system immediately provided firing solutions for each target, accounting for distance, wind, and movement. Sarah eliminated two hostiles with precision headshots before they could establish proper firing positions. Sullivan engaged the third with his sidearm, three rapid shots dropping the mercenary mid-stride. The fourth hostile took cover behind an armored vehicle, returning fire that forced Sarah and Sullivan to keep their heads down. From his position on the right flank, Blackwood identified the threat and executed a tactical approach using the burning vehicles as concealment before flanking the hostiles' position and neutralizing the threat with a close-quarters burst from his M4. "Clear to move," he called, providing covering fire as Sarah and Sullivan resumed their advance. They encountered two more hostile teams before reaching Alpha, each engagement demonstrating the remarkable synergy they had developed despite their disparate backgrounds. Sullivan's veteran tactical awareness, Blackwood's aggressive combat instincts, and Sarah's extraordinary marksmanship combining to overcome superior numbers. As they converged on the east entrance to Alpha, a final hostile team attempted to cut them off, six operators in full tactical gear, deploying from an armored personnel carrier. The team moved with the disciplined coordination of elite special forces, immediately establishing interlocking fields of fire that threatened to pin down the trio in exposed positions. Heavy opposition, Blackwood called, taking cover behind a concrete barrier that provided minimal protection against the concentrated fire. Sullivan, caught in an equally vulnerable position, assessed the situation with veteran calm. "Mitchell, we need a solution." Sarah had already identified their predicament. The hostiles had established tactical superiority. Any attempt to move from their current positions would result in immediate engagement from multiple angles. Traditional response options were limited. What came to her then wasn't from her military training, but from her years of Olympic competition, specifically an exhibition demonstration she had performed in Beijing, where she had engaged 5 targets in rapid succession with a single round per target, requiring instantaneous adjustment between shots. "I need covering fire on my mark," she called. 3-second window to reposition. Sullivan and Blackwood acknowledged, preparing to lay down suppressing fire. 3, 2, 1 mark. As her companions opened fire, forcing the hostiles to momentarily seek cover, Sarah executed a precise movement to a position that gave her line of sight on all 6 enemies. The XM-2100's advanced optics system locked onto each target, calculating the minute adjustments required between shots. What followed defied conventional combat expectations. In a sequence lasting less than 4 seconds, Sarah fired 6 shots each, requiring completely different ballistic solutions, each finding its target with lethal precision. The display of marksmanship was beyond exceptional. It was, for all practical purposes, statistically impossible. Yet the results were undeniable. 6 hostiles neutralized in less time than most skilled operators would need to engage a single target effectively. Sullivan emerged from cover, his weathered face revealing a rare expression of genuine awe. "I've been in this business for 45 years, he said quietly. "Never seen anything like that." Blackwood simply shook his head, words apparently inadequate for what he had just witnessed. They reached the entrance to Alpha without further opposition, the heavy security door opening to reveal Colonel Harrison and a team of security personnel who had established a defensive perimeter within the hardened facility. "Report," Harrison demanded as they entered the door, sealing behind them with a reassuring thunk of heavy bolts engaging. "Base is compromised," Sullivan replied succinctly. "Professional mercenaries, at least 30, possibly more. Eastern European origin, using Russian equipment. They targeted communications and power first, then the command structure. Harrison nodded grimly. We've established contact with external forces. QRF from Camp Lejeune is inbound ETA 30 minutes. Our job is to hold this position until they arrive. Sarah moved to a monitoring station checking the surveillance feeds that remained operational. The base remained in chaos, scattered firefights continuing across the compound as security forces engaged the invaders. But something in the pattern struck her as odd. They're not pressing their advantage, she observed. They could have overwhelmed the remaining security forces by now, but they're holding back, maintaining positional control rather than advancing. Sullivan joined her at the monitors, his experienced eyes confirming her assessment. You're right. This isn't a takeover operation. It's containment keeping us isolated until something else happens. Or until someone arrives, Blackwood added, the implication clear in his tone. Harrison's secure phone buzzed a coded signal indicating an incoming priority communication. He answered, listened briefly, then looked up with grave concern. Surveillance has detected a helicopter inbound from the north, no transponder flying low to avoid radar. ETA 5 minutes. That's their extraction plan, Sullivan concluded. But for whom? The answer crystallized in Sarah's mind with sudden clarity. Not extraction, insertion. They're bringing in a specialist, someone who knows exactly what they're looking for. Carter, Blackwood suggested. Sullivan shook his head. Carter's in custody. This is someone else, someone higher in the network. Harrison activated the facility's defense protocols, security shutters descending over windows, and additional reinforcement engaging on all entry points. Whatever they're planning, they'll have to get through 2 feet of reinforced concrete to reach us. A distant explosion rattled the building larger than the previous detonations and seemingly closer to their position. That wasn't random, Blackwood assessed, moving to check the external cameras. That was targeted shaped charges designed to breach hardened structures. The surveillance feed showed a new development, a specialized assault team approaching Alpha with heavy breaching equipment, their movements revealing higher training than the mercenaries they had encountered previously. Elite team, Sullivan identified. Former Spetsnaz by the look of those movement patterns. The real professionals have arrived. Harrison turned to the security team. Prepare for breach defense. Establish fallback positions and interlocking fields of fire. As the defenders moved to their positions, Sullivan drew Sarah and Blackwood aside. This isn't just about eliminating Sentinel assets anymore, he said quietly. They're after something specific, something they believe is in this facility. The Sentinel files, Blackwood suggested. Sullivan shook his head. Those are decentralized, stored on secured servers across multiple classified locations. No, they're after something more immediate. Sarah considered the rapid escalation of events since her identity had been revealed. They're after me, she realized. Not just to eliminate a Sentinel asset, but because of what I might know. What would you know that justifies this level of resource commitment? Blackwood asked. Before Sarah could respond, a thunderous explosion rocked the facility, the unmistakable signature of a thermobaric weapon designed to create overpressure waves capable of stunning defenders even in hardened structures. Breach in progress, Harrison called. All personnel to defensive positions. As alarms blared and the security team moved to counter the imminent assault, Sullivan gripped Sarah's arm. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and urgent. If they breach this position, you need to evacuate through the maintenance tunnel behind the armory section. It leads to an unmarked exit half a mile east of the base perimeter. I'm not leaving you to face this alone, Sarah protested. This isn't about heroics, Sullivan countered. You're the only one who's seen the connection between all the targeted killings. Read Torres the others. If they capture you, that intelligence dies with you. Another explosion shook the facility, closer this time, the assault team systematically breaching the outer defenses. He's right, Blackwood affirmed, checking his weapon and spare magazines. The mission comes before the individual. Always has, always will. Sarah recognized the truth in their words, even as she rebelled against the idea of abandoning them to face the assault alone. I'll cover your exit. Blackwood continued, his weathered face set with grim determination. Give you time to reach the tunnel. Before Sarah could respond, the main entry point to Alpha erupted in a shower of concrete and metal as the breach charge detonated. The battle for Fort Bragg had reached its critical phase, and decisions made in the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but the future of Sentinel itself. The world compressed to a tunnel of focused awareness as Sarah moved through the chaos of Alpha's collapsing defense. The breach had been executed with professional precision, multiple entry points compromised simultaneously, flashbang grenades deployed to disorient defenders, assault teams entering with disciplined fire and movement techniques. Colonel Harrison coordinated the defense with veteran calm, his commands clear and precise, despite the cacophony of gunfire and explosions. Security teams established fallback positions, trading space for time, as they conducted a fighting retreat toward the facility's core. "Mitchell, move now," Sullivan shouted over the din, laying down covering fire as Sarah made her way toward the maintenance access point he had identified. Blackwood appeared at her side, his tactical vest showing fresh blood from a grazing wound across his shoulder. "I'll cover your six," he said grimly. "Tunnel entrance is 20 meters and left at the junction." Sarah wanted to protest, to stand and fight alongside these men who had become more than just colleagues in the crucible of the past hours. But training and discipline prevailed. The mission priority was clear, and her escape with the intelligence she possessed took precedence over personal considerations. As they reached the maintenance access, Blackwood took up a defensive position, his M4 trained on the approach corridor. "Go," he ordered simply. "Complete the mission." Sarah hesitated for just a moment, then gripped his shoulder in silent acknowledgement before disappearing into the narrow passage. Behind her, she heard Blackwood engage hostile forces, the rhythmic precision of his fire indicating the deliberate conservation of ammunition against superior numbers. The maintenance tunnel was barely 4 feet high, forcing her to advance in a crouched position with the XM-2100 rifle held at the ready. Emergency lighting cast weak illumination every 10 meters, creating pools of light separated by stretches of near-total darkness. She had covered perhaps 50 meters when she heard heavy boot falls entering the tunnel behind her pursuers, who had identified her escape route despite Blackwood's defensive stand. The acoustics of the confined space made it impossible to determine numbers, but the disciplined movement suggested professional operators rather than standard mercenaries. Sarah increased her pace, maintaining tactical awareness despite the growing urgency. The tunnel branched ahead, one path continuing straight, the other angling downward to the left. Sullivan's directions had been clear, but instinct and training suggested a tactical adjustment. Instead of taking the left branch as instructed, Sarah continued straight for another 10 meters, then established an ambush position at a junction where the tunnel widened slightly. If her pursuers expected her to follow the primary escape route, they would be vulnerable to an unexpected engagement from an alternate position. She settled into a modified prone position. The XM-2100 braced against the tunnel wall, its advanced optics compensating automatically for the low-light conditions. Her breathing slowed to the measured rhythm of competition, shooting her heart rate decreasing through conscious control, creating the optimal physiological state for precision fire. The pursuers approached cautiously, experienced operators aware of the danger of advancing into a potential ambush. Their technique was textbook-perfect leapfrogging positions, one providing cover while the other advanced, maintaining disciplined spacing to minimize vulnerability to explosive ordnance. Through the rifle's thermal imaging system, Sarah counted 3 hostiles, each moving with the practiced efficiency that indicated specialized training beyond standard special forces. Their equipment confirmed Sullivan's assessment: Russian-manufactured tactical gear with the latest generation of combat enhancements. She waited, controlling her breathing, allowing the lead operative to advance past her position before engaging. The shot, when it came, was perfect, a single round that eliminated the point man instantly and silently, the suppressed subsonic ammunition creating minimal acoustic signature in the confined space. The remaining hostiles reacted with professional speed, but Sarah had already repositioned, sliding backward into a recessed maintenance alcove that provided both cover and a clear firing angle on the tunnel junction. 2 more shots in rapid succession neutralized the remaining threats before they could effectively return fire. Clear for now, but the engagement would have alerted others to her position. Sarah continued through the tunnel system, making calculated deviations from Sullivan's instructions, creating an unpredictable movement pattern while still advancing toward the ultimate exit point. She encountered 2 more hostile teams before reaching the tunnel's terminal junction, each engagement following a similar pattern of ambush and precision fire that leveraged her extraordinary marksmanship against their numerical advantage. The exit point appeared ahead, a vertical access shaft with a ladder leading to what appeared to be a maintenance building beyond the base perimeter. Sarah approached cautiously, scanning for signs of hostile presence before beginning her ascent. The night air was thick with smoke when she emerged from the tunnel, distant fires still burning across Fort Bragg, the sound of sporadic gunfire indicating that fighting continued despite the arrival of reinforcements from Camp Lejeune. The maintenance building stood isolated in a wooded area approximately half a mile east of the main compound, an inconspicuous structure designed to appear as ordinary infrastructure rather than a classified escape route. Sarah secured the exit behind her, then conducted a tactical assessment of her surroundings. The helicopter they had detected earlier was visible in the distance, its running lights off, settled on what appeared to be a small clearing near the base's northern boundary. Even at this distance, she could identify it as a military-grade transport, likely Russian Mi-17 with modified stealth features. A decision crystallized in her mind. Rather than continuing to evade as instructed, she would gather intelligence on the helicopter and its occupants. If this was indeed the arrival of a high-level operative within the conspiracy, documenting their identity could prove crucial to unraveling the entire network. She moved through the wooded terrain with practiced stealth, the movement techniques she had learned during training, allowing her to advance quietly despite the tactical gear and rifle. The XM-2100's advanced systems provided enhanced situational awareness, thermal imaging, identifying patrols in her vicinity, acoustic sensors amplifying and directionally identifying relevant sounds while suppressing background noise. As she approached the clearing, Sarah identified a defensive perimeter established around the helicopter, 8 operators in tactical positions maintaining overlapping fields of fire that would make direct approach suicidal. More concerning was the figure being escorted toward the aircraft, a tall man in civilian clothes whose bearings suggested military background despite his business attire. She settled into an observation position approximately 400 meters from the clearing, using the rifle's advanced optics to gather intelligence. The civilian's face became clear through the 20x magnification, a man in his late 50s with the hard features and calculating eyes of someone accustomed to command. Something in his appearance triggered recognition, though Sarah couldn't immediately place where she might have seen him before. The man was accompanied by 2 figures in tactical gear who maintained close protection positions, clearly veteran operators assigned to high-value personnel security rather than general combat operations. They escorted him toward the helicopter with practiced efficiency, maintaining constant visual scanning of the surroundings. Sarah activated the rifle's image capture system, documenting the civilian and his security detail for later analysis. As she did so, movement at the tree line opposite her position caught her attention, a figure moving with the distinct economy of a veteran operator, advancing in a tactical approach toward the helicopter. The thermal imaging system identified the heat signature immediately. Master Sergeant Sullivan moving alone through the underbrush with the practiced stealth that had earned him his nickname in Vietnam. He had apparently disengaged from the defense of Alpha and was conducting his own reconnaissance of the helicopter. Sarah maintained her position, continuing to document the activity in the clearing while tracking Sullivan's approach. The old sniper had closed to within 200 meters of the perimeter when something unexpected occurred. The civilian in the clearing suddenly stopped, turned directly towards Sullivan's position, and spoke to his security detail. The response was immediate and coordinated. 4 operators detached from the perimeter and moved with tactical precision towards Sullivan's location, their movement patterns indicating they had precise knowledge of his position rather than conducting a general search. Sullivan recognized the threat and attempted to withdraw, but the response team had anticipated his movement, cutting off potential escape routes with practiced efficiency. Within moments, they had him surrounded, 4 operators with weapons trained on his position, closing the circle with methodical precision. Even at this distance, Sarah could see Sullivan assess his options and recognize the futility of resistance. He slowly stood, hands raised in surrender, as the team approached and secured him. The civilian walked forward to meet the captured sniper, his posture suggesting familiarity rather than the standard caution one would expect when approaching a dangerous prisoner. Though too distant to hear their exchange, the body language suggested a conversation between acquaintances rather than adversaries. Sarah's mind raced through tactical options. Sullivan's capture fundamentally changed the operational parameters. The instruction to escape with her intelligence remained valid, but loyalty and tactical necessity now competed with that directive. As she considered her options, a new development unfolded in the clearing. The civilian and Sullivan appeared to be engaged in increasingly heated conversation, the civilian gesturing emphatically, while Sullivan maintained his characteristic calm. Then, with shocking suddenness, one of the security operators raised his sidearm and fired a single shot into Sullivan's leg, dropping the veteran sniper to one knee. The message was clear. Information was being demanded with escalating consequences for noncompliance. Decision time had arrived. Sarah assessed the tactical situation with cold precision. 8 operators maintaining perimeter security. 4 operators with Sullivan and the civilian. 2 dedicated security personnel with the high-value target. Total 14 hostiles with superior position and numbers. Against these odds, conventional tactical doctrine would advise against engagement. But Sarah wasn't operating from conventional parameters. The XM2100's capabilities combined with her extraordinary marksmanship created options that standard tactical assessments wouldn't consider viable. The clearing offered minimal cover for the hostile force, a disadvantage they accepted due to confidence in their perimeter security. If that perimeter could be compromised with sufficient speed and precision, their superior numbers would become irrelevant in the critical first seconds of engagement. Sarah established a firing position, bracing the rifle against a fallen log and adjusting her body to create the optimal shooting platform. The XM2100's ballistic computer activated, providing firing solutions for each identified target based on distance, wind conditions, and relative movement. The shot sequence formed in her mind not as conscious planning, but as intuitive recognition of the optimal engagement pattern. She would begin with the operators closest to Sullivan, then systematically eliminate the security detail around the civilian before engaging perimeter forces in order of the threat they presented. Her breathing slowed to the measured rhythm of Olympic competition, her heart rate decreasing to the optimal 50 beats per minute that had characterized her gold medal performances. Time seemed to expand around her, the hyper-awareness that elite athletes describe as the zone, focusing her perception to extraordinary acuity. The first shot broke clean, a perfect trigger press sending a subsonic round across 400 meters to find the base of the skull of the operator, holding Sullivan at gunpoint. Before the man's body had begun to fall, his second shot was already away, eliminating his nearest companion with equal precision. The third through 6 shots engaged the civilian security detail and the closest perimeter guards, each round finding its target with impossible accuracy, despite the need for a complete reacquisition between shots. The suppressed rifle made minimal sound, the subsonic ammunition creating no supersonic crack to betray her position. 6 operators down in less than 5 seconds, and only now did the remaining hostiles begin to react, their confusion evident as they sought cover and attempted to identify the source of fire. The civilian was being hustled toward the helicopter by his remaining security, the rotors already spooling up for emergency extraction. Sarah adjusted her aim to the helicopter's pilot compartment, firing 2 precision shots through the armored glass, penetrating at the exact points where the armor was thinnest due to manufacturing limitations. The aircraft's startup sequence faltered as the flight controls went dead. The remaining operators had identified her general position and began laying down suppressive fire rounds, impacting the trees and ground around her with increasing accuracy as they triangulated her location. Sarah maintained her disciplined fire, systematically eliminating threats in order of priority while adjusting her position between shots to avoid accurate counterfire. In the clearing, Sullivan had recovered sufficiently to join the engagement, retrieving a sidearm from a fallen operator and engaging the nearest hostiles with the practiced efficiency of a veteran combatant despite his wounded leg. The civilian, recognizing the collapse of his security perimeter, attempted to flee toward the tree line opposite Sarah's position. She tracked his movement through the XM2100's scope, calculating the necessary lead for a moving target at that distance. The shot, when it came, was perfect, not to kill but to incapacitate the round, passing through the civilian's upper thigh with surgical precision, severing the femoral artery without hitting bone. Within moments, the engagement was complete. 14 operators neutralized with 19 rounds, a display of marksmanship beyond the capabilities of conventional Special Forces snipers. Sarah maintained her position for several seconds, scanning for additional threats before advancing toward the clearing in a tactical approach. Sullivan had secured the civilian, applying a tourniquet to the leg wound, with the practiced efficiency of someone who had treated combat injuries many times before. He looked up as Sarah approached, his weathered face showing a complex mixture of pain, admiration, and something that might have been pride. "Eagle Eye," he said simply, using what she realized must be her designated Sentinel call sign. "Guess the program was right about you after all." Sarah secured the perimeter while assessing Sullivan's wound through and through to the meat of his thigh, painful but not immediately life-threatening if properly treated. "Blackwood?" Sullivan asked, reading the question in her expression. "Unknown," she replied. "He covered my extraction. Last I saw, he was engaging multiple hostiles at the maintenance access point." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Tough old bastard. If anyone could survive that, it's him." The civilian groaned, consciousness returning as the initial shock of his wound faded. Sarah turned her attention to him, examining his features more carefully now. Recognition finally clicked. She had seen his photograph in intelligence briefings during the past days. General Viktor Zakharov, she identified. Former GRU, now officially a consultant for various Eastern European defense ministries. Unofficially the coordinator for a network of former Warsaw Pact intelligence operatives operating in the private sector. Sullivan looked impressed. "You've been doing your homework." Reed was thorough in his intelligence gathering before Geneva, Sarah explained. His notes included Zakharov as a person of interest attending the championship under diplomatic cover. The sound of approaching helicopters reached them, American military aircraft, based on the engine signature, likely the Quick Reaction Force from Camp Lejeune arriving in force. "Looks like the cavalry finally made it," Sullivan observed dryly. Sarah secured Zakharov with plastic restraints, then checked his pockets for intelligence finding. Multiple phones, credentials, and various names, and a small data device cleverly disguised as a luxury pen. "This is significant," she noted, securing the items in her tactical pouch. "Could be the connection to the entire network." Sullivan nodded, wincing as he adjusted his position to reduce pressure on his wounded leg. "Mission accomplished then. You identified the head of the snake." As QRF helicopters approached for landing, Sarah helped Sullivan to his feet, supporting his weight as they moved toward the landing zone. "Not the head," she corrected. "Zakharov is high level, but he's an operator, not the ultimate authority. There's someone else, someone who can place assets inside American military infrastructure at the highest levels." Sullivan's expression darkened with recognition. "You're right. This goes higher, probably all the way to Washington." The first QRF team secured the landing zone, medical personnel rushing forward to treat Sullivan, while security forces established a defensive perimeter. The battlefield commander approached Sarah, taking in her tactical gear and the advanced rifle with a questioning expression. "Lieutenant Colonel James Hayes, Force Recon," he introduced himself. "You, Mitchell," Sarah nodded, maintaining tactical awareness despite the apparent security of the situation. "Harrison radioed your description and operational status," Hayes explained. "Said you're operating under Sentinel protocols with JSOC authorization." "Affirmative," Sarah confirmed. "We've secured a high-value target with significant intelligence value. Priority medical evacuation required for Master Sergeant Sullivan and immediate tactical intelligence debriefing once we reach secure facilities." Hayes nodded, impressed by her professional demeanor despite the chaos of the past hours. "We've secured most of the base. Remaining hostiles are either neutralized or in retreat. Colonel Harrison is coordinating cleanup operations from the command center." "Casualties?" Sarah asked, dreading the answer. 17 base personnel confirmed, KIA 30+ wounded," Hayes reported grimly. "Could have been much worse if they'd achieved surprise. Early warning from your team made a critical difference." "Sergeant Blackwood," she pressed. Hayes consulted his tactical pad. "Still listed as engaged at Alpha. Last report had him holding the maintenance access point against multiple hostiles. QRF team is moving to his position and now." As they boarded the helicopter for evacuation, Sarah maintained her grip on the XM-2100, the extraordinary weapon that had proven its worth beyond any expectation. Sullivan, secured on a medical stretcher beside her, watched her with thoughtful assessment. "You know," he said as the helicopter lifted off, "in 45 years of identifying and recruiting Sentinel assets, I've never seen natural talent like yours. Not just the marksmanship, though, that's exceptional, but the tactical integration, the decision-making under pressure, the ability to adapt and overcome." Sarah didn't respond immediately, her mind still processing the events of the past hours and, their implications for the broader conspiracy they had begun to unravel. "This isn't over," she finally said, looking out at the chaos of Fort Bragg below, them fires still burning in several locations, emergency vehicles with flashing lights converging on damaged structures. "Zakharov is just one piece of a much larger puzzle." Sullivan nodded in agreement, "which is why Sentinel exists. To find people like you, people with the extraordinary capabilities needed to confront threats that conventional forces aren't equipped to handle." As the helicopter banked toward the medical evacuation site, Sarah's thoughts turned to Blackwood, the gruff drill instructor who had transformed before her eyes into a battle-hardened warrior, willing to sacrifice himself for the mission. His fate remained unknown, but his courage and commitment had proven beyond question. The journey that had begun with a missed shot in Geneva and led through the deception of Alexander Reynolds had reached a critical juncture. Sarah Mitchell had found her true purpose, not in Olympic glory or gold medals, but in the shadow world where extraordinary talents served the nation's most sensitive security interests. Codename Eagle Eye had been baptized in fire, and the real mission was just beginning. 1 year later, Fort Bragg Special Operations Training Facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the firing range as Sarah Mitchell observed the trainee snipers from her position on the observation platform. Each shooter lay prone before their assigned rifle, executing the precision fire drills that had become the foundation of the reconstituted Sentinel program's selection process. "Reynolds, adjust your breathing pattern," she called to a promising candidate whose performance had been exceptional but still showed room for improvement. 3 seconds in hold, 3 gradual exhale. Your heartbeat is affecting your shot placement during the respiratory cycle. The young soldier acknowledged with a hand signal, then modified his technique as instructed. His next shot found the center of the target with improved precision. "Impressive group," a familiar voice observed from behind her, "almost as impressive as their instructor." Sarah turned to find Master Sergeant Sullivan approaching his slight limp, the only visible reminder of the wound he had sustained during the attack on Fort Bragg. At 66, he remained remarkably fit, his weathered face creased with additional lines perhaps, but his eyes still sharp with veteran intelligence. "Hayes shows promise," Sullivan noted, indicating a female shooter at the far end of the line. "Natural talent with the right psychological profile. Reminds me of you in some ways." Sarah nodded in agreement. "She has the fundamentals. We'll see if she has the adaptability when we move to the stress induction phase next week." Colonel Harrison joined them at the railing, his silver hair catching the morning light. The attack had left its mark, a jagged scar along his temple, where debris had struck him during the defense of Alpha, but his authority remained undiminished. If anything, his role in coordinating the defense had enhanced his already legendary status. "The Joint Chiefs approved our expanded recruitment parameters," Harrison informed them quietly. "After what happened here, even the Budget Committee couldn't argue with the results." The aftermath of the attack had transformed Sentinel from a shadow program to the cornerstone of a new counterintelligence initiative. Carter's extensive confession had exposed infiltration at levels that shocked even the most cynical intelligence veterans. 3 senior Pentagon officials, a Defense Intelligence Deputy Director, and 2 congressional staffers had been quietly removed following the investigation. "Blackwood's being released from Walter Reed today," Sullivan mentioned. "Doctors finally cleared him for limited duty. He'll be joining your training cadre next month." Sarah felt a genuine surge of warmth at this news. After holding off 13 hostile operators single-handedly at the maintenance access point, Blackwood had been evacuated with critical injuries. His recovery had been long and painful, 3 surgeries and 8 months of rehabilitation, but his determination had never wavered. "He'll be an asset to the program," she said simply, though all 3 understood the depth of respect behind her understated words. Before Sarah could respond further, her secure phone vibrated with the distinctive pattern indicating a priority communication. She checked the message, her expression remaining neutral despite its significance. "Zakharov's intel panned out," she informed them. "The 3 network cells we've been tracking in Berlin, Cairo, and Singapore are confirmed active. Primary targets identified." Harrison nodded gravely. "The Washington connection. Confirmed through independent channels," Sarah replied. "Former National Security Advisor Thompson was running the entire operation. Carter was just his middleman." Sullivan's weathered face hardened at the name. "Thompson. Always suspected there was something off about him even back in the Reagan years." Sarah's attention was drawn to a display case in the training facility's main hall. Inside, mounted on a custom stand, was the battered M24 rifle that Blackwood had given her during qualification day, the weapon that had revealed her true identity and initiated everything that followed. A simple plaque beneath it read, "Never underestimate the lesson of Sentinel." "Your first mission as field team leader," Sullivan observed. "How does it feel?" Sarah considered his question carefully. The Sarah Mitchell who had stood on Olympic podiums seemed increasingly distant, a different person living a different life. "It feels right," she finally answered. Like everything before was preparation for this. As they walked toward the secure briefing facility, Lieutenant Wilson, the recruit who had once helped her with land navigation, stood at attention beside the door, now serving as communications specialist for Sentinel operations. Sarah's team waited inside 8 operators, selected from elite units, each bringing specialized skills to complement her extraordinary marksmanship. They represented the future of Sentinel, not just exceptional talents, but a cohesive unit forged in the shared understanding that some threats required capabilities beyond conventional response. "Team take seats," she instructed. 72-hour deployment window, Sentinel protocols in effect. As operational details appeared on the secure display, Sarah felt the familiar focus settling over her, the same mental discipline that had earned Olympic gold now channeled toward operations where the stakes involved national security rather than medals. The girl who never missed had found her true target, and Sentinel had gained its most extraordinary operative. Codename Eagle Eye was just getting started.